Right, this is the High Street in Oxford. This is the image of the famous painting by Turner. For some reason in that painting it looks wider. I don't know why. He must have just sort of stretched it out a bit in his imagination. It's a sort of impressionist type painting. Anyway, hospital porters' pride and dignity stop the New World Order. Welcome to Panwo TV. I'm in Oxford and I'm heading once again out on another adventure. Now, the last time I was doing this, I was going to go to Cardiff and go to investigate the Penturk UFO. Now I'm going to go and see my friends at Truth Seekers North East. Yes, I think this is the fourth or fifth time I've been there. Well, the thing is, I actually went there about 3 weeks ago. Now I didn't, excuse me, I didn't film that because it was just a holiday. I didn't actually go there to do any talks or anything like that. I just went there just to see them. I was only there for a day. I actually went up there. I saw Andrew Johnson do his talk on 9/11 and other things, and then I came back and I thought, and now I'm going for a bit longer. Yeah, I just went there and came back. I went to a 3-day trip. There one day Newcastle, then back the third day. Not long enough, so I'm going for longer this time. I'm going for 5 days, well, including the journey, so it's 3 whole days there. This time it's me talking. Yes, I am the speaker at Truth Seekers North East. I'm doing a talk on the BBC. Now, I've done that before. In fact, there's a long version of this particular talk, which I did at New Horizons St Anne's. In fact, it was a bit too long. I ran out of time, which is a bit embarrassing. But I filled in with a few studio clips for the bits I missed on that particular talk at New Horizons. So you can watch that if you like. But this, it has a little bit of a few extras in it, and also has a few extras, and also it's slightly shorter. And of course there'll be a Q&A as well, so it will be different to the last talk I gave. All my talks are different, so hopefully you'll enjoy that. But for the time being, I'm just heading through Oxford to the coach station to get the coach and make my way to Newcastle. It's about 7:30 in the morning, and I'm really looking forward to it. I just love those people at Truth Seekers North East, and I'm looking forward to seeing them again. I didn't see Richard Wright last time I was there. He had to work, so he couldn't come to the event, although I did meet his brother. So I'm looking forward to seeing Richard, catching up on a few things. He's a great guy into UFOs and stuff, and he's doing a talk too. In fact, this event is it's not just me talking, it's not just my event. There are 3 speakers. There's Richard, myself, I think I'm in the middle, and there's Mark Hocking. Mark you'll know if you're familiar with Critical Mass Radio and Panwo Radio, because Mark was one of the hosts of CMR in those good old days. I feel nostalgic whenever I think about CMR, and he's been a guest on the Panwo show recently, so you'll know him if you listen to Panwo Radio. And there's these guys trying to catch fish on the on the top of the college there. So I'm just going to make sure I don't get in their way, because I don't want to scare the fish off. So I'll see you later. And we're off. The weather's a bit nicer. Look at that. There's a couple of chemtrails, old chemtrails there, you can see. That line, is actually, that's actually a reflection of the light, so that's not a chemtrail. I really thought it was. And someone's just got on the coach late. The weather forecast, luckily, is actually pretty good. Unlike it was when I went to Wales a few days ago. It's actually said to be quite warm. A few showers up north, but nothing serious. And tomorrow's going to be quite sunny and warm, because the northeast of England is much colder than Oxford. I noticed that, and they've They've told me that, and I know that from studying the climate data. When I went there with Nick Colostrum last year, it was bloody freezing. I remember it was icy the whole time. There I am on the coach. I just love travelling by coach, I really do. It's just so much easier than the train. I can't stand rail travel, it's so stressful. On trains, very often you just don't get a seat. I mean, about half the trains I've been on are overcrowded. The service has really gone downhill on trains, and of course it's a lot more expensive. The prices, I mean, there's all kinds of news stories about rising train ticket prices. Also, you get a better class of people on coaches. That's probably because on trains, if you moment you get on a train, they can't wait to send the trolley round with the overpriced cans of lager for you to have your to part with your money. On a coach, alcohol is banned. Whereas I've seen fights on trains, I've seen all kinds of horrible things on trains. Trains are dirty, the toilets very often don't work, or they're overflowed, or they're full of all kinds of horrible things. On a coach, that very rarely happens. The only advantage of the train is it's quicker. The train will probably get you there in about 5 hours, whereas this is going to take 9 hours. But so what? I'm not in any rush. I've got a book to read, I can sleep. It's more than you can do on a train. There's too much noise. You have to worry about people swiping your luggage. Oh no, get me head down, have a rest. And here I am back in Birmingham, just 4 days after I was here before. So I'm certainly getting around a bit, aren't I? I'm sort of travelling quite extensively. So well, that's good, isn't it? We're just about to leave Birmingham Coach Station. All's good so far. Everyone's on time. All the coaches have been on time so far, so hopefully that will continue. And I'll arrive at Newcastle by it's 6:20. I'm due to arrive. We'll see if it actually gets there on time. I'm in Leicester. And of course, Leicester is where David Icke comes from. Right, I'm a shop at the Leeds bus station. And I go along here, along with National Geographic and all these other magazines, Private Eye, New Scientist. And what do I see? Nexus! Nexus magazine is here in Leeds bus station at the shop. How about that? I didn't expect that. Alright, we're at Sunderland now. We just left Sunderland coach station, which is very close to Newcastle, although there's a big cultural divide apparently. If you live in Sunderland, people in Newcastle call you a Mackem. But and there's a lot of rivalry in the football, things like that. Some videos on YouTube about Mackems and how dirty they are, things like that. I like monkeys. This is a different route to the last time I went. Well, I went via Milton and Keynes. Last time I didn't stop at Sunderland. We went around by Gateshead. I was going to, if we went through Gateshead, well, we might still go through it, but I think we're going a different way. I'd have showed you there was a strange UFO event there in 1940. A grey alien appeared in the middle of the city, I believe. And there's this guy called Robert Hall, who's no relation to Richard, although Richard did investigate it. This alien appeared, and it was like a Roswell type event. It was a very interesting story. He tells his story about what happened to him. Excuse me. And it's on Richard's channel if you want to watch it. One of his early videos on Rich Planet TV. And his uncle Ernie whacks in with a shovel at a coal yard, this dead alien, and apparently the dead alien was kept in the basement of a church. And this guy Robert Hall had a mark on it. He believes he was abducted. There was this craft where there was all these aliens. There was like Bigfoot type aliens and lots of other type aliens inside the craft. Because there are aliens that look like Bigfoot. It's unlikely that someone would actually make that story up back then, and when the idea of aliens wasn't popular. And also the craft was bigger on the inside than the outside, like Doctor Who's TARDIS. And it's another weird thing. Again, it makes it more credible in my view. It's not the sort of thing someone would really make up. It's a kind of idea that wouldn't occur to a boy growing up in that era. Very interesting. Anyway, we're not far off now. I think we're going to arrive on time, if not a bit early, so that's good. I'm tired. It's a long 9-hour coach ride, as I said earlier. I need a pint of beer or cider. I need some food. I'm hungry. Looking forward to seeing my friends from Truth Seekers North East. They're lovely people. Really, really like spending time with them. Right, I've got another little update on a subject that many of you have been asking me about since it first went public a little while ago, and I made a video in which I discussed this called "Is There Any Hope?" A lot of you have just said, well, how's that going? What's happening? Well, it's some good news. I'm pleased to tell you that Dr. Nick Colostrum and myself we're on much better terms now than we were. If you remember that Nick and I we sort of fell out over the first trip I did to Truth Seekers North East with him, which was a year ago, and the whole thing is explained in my video called "Is There Any Hope?" The whole situation. And well, we didn't. As I said, I thought that was it. I thought we weren't going to have any more contact, but then we met up at Richard D. Hall's live show, the Rich Planet Tour, the London event for Rich Planet Tour, and I met up with him there, and we talked normally. Was pleased to see each other and everything, and since then we've talked some more, we've exchanged emails, and indeed recorded an interview for Hapanwo Radio, which will be broadcast sometime probably next month. I'm really pleased, actually. I mean, I do stand by what I said, and he does too, I think, but it's just sometimes it's just too exhausting to pursue these things. It gets to the point where you just miss people, and I think, you know, I think he's as pleased as I am that we can now talk and work together again, and I hope to work a lot more with him in the future. In fact, Truth Seekers North East have asked if he wants to come back to do another show with them, and if he does, I'll be really pleased to accompany him. It'd be a great honour to be on stage with him again. So, well, Nick knows about this, and I'll let you know as soon as something's arranged, and I'll pre-advertise it on a Hapanwo Voice and hopefully get to film it again. So when that happens, if and when, there will be a Hapanwo TV video of myself and Dr. Nick Colostrum in Newcastle upon Tyne once again. Well, I've arrived. Yeah, I'm in Newcastle, and it's quite warm actually. It's not warm, but it's like not cold. It's quite mild. I'm just waiting for my friends to pick me up. They're stuck in traffic at the moment, so I need a pint and I need some food. Oh, what a journey! But I made it. I'm here for the next 5 days. Looking forward to it. Now, the first thing I did actually when I got to Newcastle was on the Thursday night, the day after I arrived, and that was I went to see David Icke live. And here we have a little picture here of our Dave wearing a Truth Seekers North East hat. Yes, indeed. What happened was, now, yeah, it was really, really good actually, because it's been over 2 years since I last went to a live David Icke lecture, and the previous time was 2016, and you'll remember, if you watch Hapanwo TV, that I made a little video about it. But a lot has changed since then. We had the Leave vote on the EU referendum just after that show. Still waiting for Brexit, of course. David's had a couple more grandchildren. I've split up with Sue Stain. And there's been an upswing in this ridiculous recurring cycle of, oh, David Icke hates Jews. Oh, I've covered that already, how ridiculous and stupid that is. Okay, so I don't have to repeat it here. What it did was, David was not able to reveal the venue of his talk until 24 hours beforehand. If he hadn't done that, then basically his enemies would have threatened the hosts. They'd have phoned him up,
told them they had to drop him, told them what an evil Nazi he was, and reputation, etc. We're going to blacken your name, etc. And they'd even, if that didn't work, they'd turn up and harass the audience with violence as we went in. They've done that. We've this video of it. They did it in Canada, if you remember, from the that ridiculous John Ronson documentary. So I went to the event with my friends from Truth Seekers North East, and it was a bit like being a secret agent, because we drove into the Newcastle racecourse, which is where it happened. There were luckily no masked, angry SJWs around. We'd given them a slip. So we had dinner in the pub in the actual location, and then 3 of my friends went ahead. The rest of us finished our meal. When we arrived, they grabbed some front row seats, and they'd met David Icke, taken photos with him. And so you see, that's when we see him with the hat here. He clearly doesn't want to mess his hair up, so he's only sort of perching it on the top of his pompadour there. The lecture took place in a large conference room that overlooks the race course, but at that time of night there were no horses galloping about. I swear there were 200 seats there, and they were all full. It was a sellout. You know what I mean by sellout, not in the sellout sense, but you know what I mean. And I saw a few people I knew. It's a bit of a reunion with a couple of them. As soon as he got on stage, David gave a shout out to Truth Seekers North East. Yeah, how about that? That's quite something. I'm sure they were absolutely over the moon about that. Maureen and the others, they really were. Now the format is slightly different. He's gone from his all-day talks, 12 hours on and off, and now he does an evening of 4.5 hours with a single break of just 10 minutes only. And he covers a lot of the same material as he's done before, and that's to be expected because of his live shows. And his books. They're all his live shows and books are intended to be self-contained, so everything you need's there. No former knowledge is assumed when people go along. But he has updated his repertoire, lots of new information, and different metaphors and terminology. For instance, what he used to call the hassle-free zone, he now calls the postage stamp consensus. I consider both. I consider both metaphors pretty good, actually. Now, the first 2/3 of the event were the bad news. The last third was the good news, which is another hallmark of his style. And he's been doing this since he went conspiratorial in the early 90s. And he still wears his trademark blue shirt. It's as much a motif as Andrew Johnson's fleece. And he sort of goes around, he closes his eyes a lot when he's talking. I noticed that, and I wonder if he's channeling. All in all, the event was a brilliant triumph for David Icke. I felt informed and inspired as I do at every one of David Icke's shows. No Antifas turned up to ruin it. It was great. He endorsed Truth Seekers North East on stage live, which is really, really good. And, well, he's David straight off to Cardiff now for the next stop on his tour, accompanied by his roadies, his son Jamie and Jamie's girlfriend. So thanks very much to David and his team, and for all my friends at the Truth Seekers North East who went with me. It was truly a wonderful evening, and I really loved it. Now, along with my main talk, which took place on Saturday the 17th in the afternoon, there was a second event, a sort of warm-up event by Truth Seekers North East at the same venue on the Friday evening. That's basically, I was doing a talk on UFOs. Now, I discussed UFOs on the previous time I was there, as you know, if you watched the video, and I was given an update with a lot of new information on the subject, and also this was pretty much an audience question and answer too. I did a short lead off, as you'll hear, and then just basically opened up the floor. So I think it was a very, very interesting event, and went on a long time. People had fun, people gained a lot from it, so well, let's see if you do as well. You just flick the switch on there. Flick the switch on there to switch it on. Is it? Oh, is it? Yeah, that's.
Testing 1, 2.
Yeah, working.
Okay.
How much do we need it for such a for people? I've got it just in case.
Okay, guys, are we all here? Whoever's going to be here is here. Okay. Well.
Want the lights dimmed or?
Do you guys want it lights dimmed? Okay. Because this is sort of like a.
We're going into cinema theatre mode.
Yeah. Okay.
Well,
you're better already.
another truth.
That's better.
Is that alright?
Yeah.
You see the slide?
Is it alright for your camera, Ben?
Yeah, that's cool. That's absolutely cool.
Lights, camera, action. Okay, another Truth Seekers Northeast. Welcome to Mr. Ben Emlyn-Jones here at the Ray Gray Centre. And this is just a little preliminary to tomorrow's event. Ben's going to be talking about some recent UFO cases and the like. So I'd just like to put your hands together and welcome Ben.
Thank you. Thanks, Dave. Thank you very much. Well, this is, thank you all for coming, all of you. Hope you can hear me all right. I've got this here, so I'm not sure if this was necessary, but just in case I'm using it, because it's a nice, small, sort of cosy group. In fact, I advertised this event as a fireside chat with Ben Emlyn-Jones. You may be thinking, what? Where's the fire? What's that over there? See, that is a fire. I've had it checked by the Trade Descriptions Act, and
it's not so
yeah, well, I think it counts as a type of fire, so I think I'm covered there legally. So shouldn't be any issue, you know. So if you want to, you can try and sue me if you like. Good luck. But
I won't get blood over the stone, Ben.
it's good to be back here again. This is, I think, my 5th visit or tour, because I'm doing 2 events here. And well, last night I went to see David Icke. That's why I got the T-shirt. I don't know how many of you were there at the David Icke show. Yeah, it was good. It was a good event. I loved it. Oh, David is fantastic. It's great to have him in the northeast. But this is my 5th visit here, and or 4th when I'm speaking. I came up myself as well. Is that the girl I met in the pub earlier?
Sorry.
Tell her I'll call her back. But it's all right. Tomorrow, if you come here tomorrow, but just incidentally, I just mentioned my talk tomorrow. I will again at the end. I'll be talking about the BBC and where your licence fee really goes. And I think you'll find that interesting. Today, we're going to go back to my favourite subject, UFOs, unidentified flying objects. Now, for those of you who were here at my last talk, and I did like a Friday evening talk last time, I did a whole talk where I did a conversation with Richard Wright, who's sitting at the back there, and he's going to be speaking tomorrow as well. We did a talk about various subjects, including the UFO phenomenon. Now, since then, there's been a few updates. What I'll do is I'll just give a little lead off for a while. I don't know how long it will last, and then we'll open up to the floor, because this could be kind of a discussion more than me just talking. Since I spoke last, there's been a number of news stories which indicates that the way the media is portraying the UFO phenomenon has changed. It's changed very subtly but very distinctly over time, to the point where news stories are actually different to how they used to be, which indicates there's several possibilities. One, which I think is unlikely, is that the whole thing is just another level of disinformation. In other words, the news is deliberately changing the way it portrays the UFO subject in line with the keepers of the truth embargo. The keepers of the truth embargo have directed this change, because it's in order to cover up more cleverly or more subtly or more certainly the truth about UFOs. The problem I have with that theory is why? Why not just stay silent? If you're going to put out disinformation in response to a news story, is one thing. To put out disinformation when no existing story exists it really makes me wonder why that's been done. What does it hope to achieve? It's in a sense directing your attention towards something with the ultimate intention of deflecting it away, which is a very risky gambit. It could backfire in any number of ways. To the point where I don't think they would bother. I think it'd be better just to keep quiet and hope no one looks. So that's what I wonder. There's a number of news stories I want to cover now, which I think there's 3 events in particular I want to discuss, which I think you might find interesting. The third one is essentially not really a news story, but I think it's a very interesting case that has emerged, which has been covered by the alternative media. But I want to deal with 2 mainstream media stories first. And the first is this one here, which actually came out on Monday, I believe, or Tuesday, 13th of November, yeah, which I believe was Tuesday. UFO spotted off the Irish coast under investigation. This is from the BBC. This isn't from Panmo Voice. It's not from Infowars.com. It's not from DavidIke.com. It's the BBC. And when you read through it, it's clear that something real actually happened. There was some kind of event that took place. What happened was, this happened off the coast of County Kerry, on the southwest of Ireland. Two aircraft independently spotted some bright lights that were moving in a way which the pilots of those aircraft wondered what they were. One was a British Airways flight from Montreal, Canada, to Heathrow Airport in London. Another was a Virgin Atlantic, and I'm not sure exactly where that was going to and from. But both pilots actually reported this object to air traffic control, and they were very relieved when they found out they weren't the only ones reporting it, because they thought, oh, I'm the only witness. But when they realised there were two separate witnesses from two separate aircraft, I think that made it more interesting. What they described was bright lights travelling. One reported it travelling from alongside the aircraft. They described something alongside the aircraft which accelerated away to the north, that is, away from the aircraft's left-hand side. And they describe it as being very, very fast indeed. One said in excess of Mach 2. Mach 2 in aviation terms means twice the speed of sound. It's the actual speed of the Concorde, which no longer flies. So there's no aircraft that can sustain that speed for very long, apart from that one aircraft. None that we know of anyway. So that air traffic control, you can actually hear the conversation which has been recorded. It's been released from between air traffic control and these two aircraft, and the pilots of these two aircraft. Pilots, of course, are not prone to making these things up. There's very little incentive, or no incentive at all, for a pilot to make these things up, unless they want to commit professional suicide. And things aren't as bad as they used to, but it was quite common for pilots to be grounded when they made these responses. And Steven Spielberg, when he was researching his film Close Encounters of the Third Kind, he found this out. In fact, there's a scene at the beginning of the film which is of an airline pilot and air traffic control, and you hear the pilot talking about what he saw, and the air traffic control responding to them, and then the air traffic controller asks, "Do you want to report a UFO?" The pilot responds, "Negative." Doesn't want to say anything about it. That's improving slightly now. There's a pilot called Ray Boyer, who was flying his twin-engine airliner off the coast of the Channel Islands, and saw an object that he describes as sausage-shaped and 3 miles long. And skeptics say he just saw an airship of some kind. But the largest airship is actually, the largest aircraft ever is the Hindenburg, which is a huge airship, 805 feet long, which actually blew up. It exploded in 1936 near New York. And no other aircraft has ever been built, no airship has ever been built close to that size. Modern airships are much, much smaller than that. But he's described it as yellow in colour as well. And so, being a pilot, he not only knows he has a professional reputation to maintain, in a time when pilots are continuously assessed for their mental health, following several the suicide crash in Switzerland, especially a couple of years ago. And but also, I mean, a pilot is trained to observe and has an awareness of objects in the sky that perhaps a civilian wouldn't. So a passenger in the seat near the back, looking out of his porthole, would not actually, I think, probably be as good a witness as the pilot sitting in the cockpit, for that reason. Not only that, but pilots are often, their passengers are served alcohol and things like that. And so when a pilot says something, we should take it seriously. There is another pilot, Captain Tamagotchi, no, I was going to say Tamagotchi, Terahuchi, apologies for that. 1986, he was in a cargo plane flying off the coast of Alaska, saw a huge craft, he reckons about a mile across, a disc-shaped object about a mile across, enormous. So, and he stood by his story, he completely stood by his story, and he did get into trouble for it, from his employer, from the Aviation Authority of Japan, things like that. So we have this situation now where just less than a week ago, we have 2 pilots reporting strange objects near the craft. Now, it says in this article, it does say these are likely to be meteors, but again, this is something that a pilot would probably be familiar with, because bolide meteors are quite common, more common than people think. And for someone who's always in the sky high up and always looking out their windows, it's quite like that. I mean, obviously there's been no interviews with these two pilots, but maybe they'll say differently, but you can often say, hello, thanks for coming. They will often probably recognise these objects as something explicable and would not bother making a report. Time will tell, but I think this is a very significant case. The way this is reported is very, very interesting. There doesn't seem to be the usual spin that you get through the mainstream media. And I don't see really what they could gain if this was done deliberately, if this is just some kind of deliberate tactic. And so when people say, oh Ben, can't you see it? This is just another deeper level of the conspiracy, Ben, can't you? I can see it, why can't you? This is why I'm so much cleverer than you are, Ben. When people say that, I think, come on a minute. Again, it's drawing people's attention. It's like saying, it's like you've got a hidden jewel over here, and you stand next to the hidden jewel underneath a jewel like a pearl or a diamond underneath the floorboards of this area. What would you do if you had that? You'd just keep quiet about it, wouldn't you? You wouldn't stand on top of it and go, everybody in this room, there's a diamond hidden in the far corner over there. That's essentially a bad way of organising a cover-up, in my view. And there's more. Now this is... right. This looks... I don't know what this is. Exactly, I was going to... You see, it was probably going through people's mind. This looks distinctly lavatorial. I mean, it's... This is an artist's impression of what's known as Oumuamua. Now this strange object actually we don't know if it looks like that or not. This is, NASA employed an artist to create an image of what it might look like. This is an object that actually approached the solar system late last year. It was spotted in, I think it was spotted in October last year. It was already heading away from the Earth when it was spotted. It actually arrived in the solar system, went round the sun. It changed its course as a result of the gravitational fields, as natural objects in space should do. And to begin with, it behaved as you would expect an object in a gravitational field to behave. It was spotted when it was already leaving the Earth from the Pan-STARRS telescope in Hawaii, which is a telescope specifically designed to spot asteroids and comets. But it didn't take long for the astronomer, Dr. Karen Meach, to realise that this object was not actually in orbit around the Sun. It was not one of the usual things that orbits. Now, most things that orbit the Sun are planets, like the Earth, which vary in size from Jupiter, which is enormous, to the Earth, and they get smaller and smaller and smaller, so they're just little lumps of rock. And those little lumps of rock are called asteroids rather than planets. Now this was thought to be an asteroid. It's about the size, a normal sized asteroid, about 1,000 feet long. Yet it's on a course. Its course and speed indicates that it's actually come from interstellar space, from beyond the solar system, from somewhere out there. You know, the truth is out there, and all that sort of thing. So that's really, really a really amazing situation. Now this object headed back out into space. It's heading away from space. It's very, very fast indeed. In fact, in January it's going to pass the orbit of Saturn. That's very, very fast indeed. Now, several strange things about this object. Firstly, its shape. Now, we don't know exactly if it looks like that, but we do know that it is very long and very thin. It's about 1,100 feet long, but it's only about 100 feet wide, which indicates it is an elongated object. NASA, as I said, employed an artist to draw a picture of it, and the picture they drew makes it look specifically like a natural object, like it's craggy, it's uneven, it's pitted, as the surface of asteroids actually do look like, and comets as well look like. But we don't know it looks like that. No one has seen it. It's not been visible. If you look at actual real photographs of this, it's nothing more than a point of light. You can't actually see a distinct outline of this object in any telescope that we have. It was too far away, moving too fast for us to get a really good look at it. For all we know, it might actually be long and thin and oblong like the monolith in 2001, A Space Odyssey. It might be that, it might be another, it may be smooth, maybe. We don't know much about it. What we do know is it's dark red in colour. It's made primarily of iron, and it is this shape, this particular shape. They know that because of its, it changes its brightness, indicating a different side being reflecting light from the sun. It is tumbling and orbiting. It's rolling. Its movement is very strange. It's rolling over and over along its short axis, but it's also tumbling on its long axis, and it also has a wobble for the long axis rotation. So it goes through a cycle of rotation, rather like the Earth does in terms of seasonal changes, which is very, very unusual. Very, very unusual. More, you don't get many asteroids and comets doing that, so that's extremely unusual indeed. And the strangest thing of all is that it has begun to change course and speed. Now this was actually announced a couple of months ago, and I actually did a video at the time about this on my channel. If you watch Hapanmo TV, you'll have seen the live stream I did on this particular subject. I wrote an article about it as well on Hapanmo Voice, which is my principal blog. It wasn't covered much in the mainstream news, but there has now been mainstream news stories about this. This is from the Science and Technology Daily.com, the online version. And what you have here is they're asking several questions, because a group of scientists working for Harvard University, which is part of the Ivy League in the United States, one of the most elite universities in that particular country, has been saying that it's possible this is some kind of artificial object. They believe that it may be responding to the pressure of solar wind, which it could only be doing if it had what is called a solar sail, which is actually a type of propulsion system for spacecraft. It's been invented on Earth as well. Basically, it is exactly what it says. It's a sail. It's like a big piece of material many miles across, which you spread out ahead of your spaceship. And it basically, the solar wind hits the solar wind are charged particles from the sun. It's not like the wind on the Earth, but it's similar and it's much thinner. But it does exert a pressure. It does over a big enough area, so you have something a big sail miles across. The solar wind will provide actual drag, actual propulsion for the craft. And the good thing about it is that you don't need to carry any fuel with you, and something with a solar sail can actually accelerate to huge speeds because there's no drag, there's nothing to resist it, isn't there? Now, the conventional explanation for this is that this is actually some kind of comet. It's an interstellar object, but it's actually a type of comet. A comet is similar to an asteroid, except it is made of a mixture of rock and ice. It comes from much further out in the solar system. It orbits, usually on a very, very long period, from as far as a light year away, and it sometimes comes into the inner solar system. Now, comets are famous for having tails, these big streams that come out of the comet, which actually spread out behind the object. They don't spread out behind the object's course, though. They spread out away from the sun. Because what these tails are is actually a plume of material which is being released by the comet, because the ice, and what happens is that the ice inside the comet, because it's a mixture of ice and rock, the ice, when it gets near the sun and then the sun starts to warm it up, the ice melts and eventually it evaporates, it turns to steam, and it is ejected from the comet, mixed in with lots of bits of dust and other things from inside inside this object. And this produces this beautiful tail you see behind, which makes comets so famous. But it also acts as a propulsion system. It can do, like a little rocket. So comets do actually change course and speed to a certain extent. The plumes, these outgassings it's called, actually do provide thrust. So it's almost like a rocket. It's a non-directed rocket. It goes all over the place, so comets can actually rotate, they can move course, they can go back, they can go in all kinds of different ways. They can spin around like Catherine wheels, depending on where this outgassing is and how powerful it is. Strange thing about Oumuamua is, though, when it came near the sun, when it was around in the area where it should have been outgassing, nothing happened. It actually behaved exactly as we'd expect a non-comet to behave. So when it was first observed, it was about 20 million miles from the Earth. It actually passed within 15 million miles from the Earth, which sounds like a great distance, and indeed 15 million miles is, but in cosmic terms it's scraping the paint off. It's really close. But it wasn't outgassing then. It's outgassing now, which means it is, presumably there's molten water and ice, and the ice is melted, and there's steam and vapour. But it's actually close to the orbit of Saturn. It's freezing cold where this object is now. So it's strange that it's outgassing now and not when it was closer to the Sun, if indeed that's what's happening. There's no visible tail. Dr. Meach says it's because it's outgassing a non-visible material, such as carbon dioxide, she reckons, which doesn't produce any kind of visible tail. However, that's not known. It's speculation. So, why is it changing course and speed now? That's a question. Now, a couple of months ago, the Breakthrough Listen project for the search for extraterrestrial intelligence actually decided to scan this particular object. Breakthrough Listen is actually a part of the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, funded by Yuri Milner, who's a Russian oligarch, who is spending billions and billions of pounds on building telescopes and getting astronomers together to actually search for signals from out there in space from intelligent sources. And I've done an entire presentation on that, so that's very interesting. But Breakthrough Listen did turn a telescope on this, a radio telescope on this particular object, and there was no response from it at all. That was when it was much closer to the Earth, when it wasn't changing course and speed. I wonder if it may be possible, it may be worthwhile, Breakthrough Listen, repeating that experiment now, turning their telescope on this particular object to see if it's radiating an intelligent signal. Now it's actually moving. We don't know what happened, but it could turn around and come back. What if it turns around and comes back? Would that prove it? That's the question. And is this the only one, or if this is an intelligent object, an intelligently designed spacecraft that has actually entered the solar system, is this the only one, or are there more coming behind it? Now, a very, very interesting chap indeed is Arthur C. Clarke. How many of you heard of Arthur C. Clarke? He's a very famous chap, yeah. He's presented TV shows, some really good TV shows on mysteries and things like that. He's also an excellent science fiction writer, and I went through a phase when I was obsessed with him, and I read everything he'd ever written over and over again. And one of his most famous books, one of his most famous novels, is called Rendezvous with Rama. And it is about a future scenario where a strange object, a long, thin, cylindrical object, comes into the solar system and flies close to the Sun. It behaves like a natural object at first. It's not powered, it just drifts with gravitational fields. And they actually send a spacecraft to investigate it, which they haven't done this time, unfortunately. They send a spacecraft to investigate it, and these guys get inside it. It's a very, very interesting book. But then the object comes to life, and it starts moving of its own accord. At the very end, the last line of the dialogue in the entire novel is, the Ramas do everything in threes, which means, are there more coming? Maybe there's another Oumuamua coming. The thing about Arthur C. Clarke is he was very, very prescient. I mean, there's some articles, and because he wrote non-fiction and fiction, both in his fiction and non-fiction, there's many, many documents, books, from a long time ago that seem to predict things that have actually happened, both technologically and in terms of news cycles. So, for example, in the famous 2001 Space Odyssey, which is both a novel and a film, which were written at the same time by Clarke and Kubrick. The film is not an adaptation of the novel. The novel is. They were written together. You hear the phrase, Houston, we've had a problem. And of course, with Apollo 13, you get that same line again. We've had a problem. And it's almost like it is almost like something prescient. It's really, really spooky. And there are many other examples that make you wonder how much Arthur C. Clarke knew, whether he had without knowing it, had some form of precognitive ability. So we'll see what this thing does, because they're going to keep an eye on Oumuamua. It's possible, I mean, even leaving aside the secret space program, which you heard from Andrew Johnson a couple of weeks ago, even if you leave that aside, it is possible to send some craft up to investigate it, but it will be very difficult because this thing's travelling very fast and it's already a very long way away. You'd have to build a very powerful rocket, and a probe, which to give it a, basically tail chase it, which will take several decades, to the point where you could actually get close to it. But then again, it might turn around and come back. You never know. If it does, then we'll know about it. I don't believe it's possible to stop us from finding out. I know there's been some news stories about telescopes being shut down, things like that. I mean, there's the Solar Observatory in New Mexico being shut down, and the call has gone out, well, perhaps there's some kind of cover-up over what's up in the sky. But as I said in my longer presentation about the whole SETI program, you can't shut down every telescope on Earth. Even if you get rid of all the big, you make sure all the big ones run by the government, by universities, the big professional astronomical telescopes, if you get those closed down all across the world, it's going to be very obvious you're doing it. And what about the amateur hobbyists? There's millions of them all over the world. So I don't believe it's possible to cover things up in the sky. It's just, the data is above our heads, it's there for us all to see. So if this thing turns around and starts coming back, we're going to know about it. No one's going to be able to cover that up. Very exciting indeed. There's one more incident I want to discuss. This is something that I've actually looked into myself. I've just done a video about it, actually. There we go. That's just a picture there. That's a picture of a part of it. But this is something that I think has not been covered really by the mainstream media, but it has been covered very, very extensively by the independent media. Rich Planet TV's done a piece on this, and I myself have done so. Project Camelot have covered it, several other people. This is a UFO sighting that actually took place in February 2016, less than 3 years ago. And it's a major UFO event, I would say, and it took place in Wales, just north of Cardiff, in a village called Penturch. I actually went there last weekend and did some filming, and I interviewed the principal witness to this event, who's speaking publicly, and the principal investigator. There's a video on my channel, Ben the JR Porter, on YouTube, which is the latest one on there if you want to watch that entire video and then see the interviews and see where I actually visit the place where this happened. But what actually occurred was, first of all, there was a large amount of aircraft flying around above the village before anything strange happened, which is a very, very interesting question. You want to know, well, how do they know in advance that that's going to happen? It's almost like the government itself had foreknowledge, and you don't know exactly how or why that could be, but you see it with several other incidents. For instance, the Belwyn Mountains incident, and the what's called the Nottinghamshire Roswell, the Mansfield incident of 1987. It seems like the government are ready to respond. They're not at the exact location, but they're in the area, close by, within a short distance, so they can get people into that area to deal with it. The existing teams that deal with UFOs when they occur. We don't know how we don't. Maybe the aliens phoned them up and say, "Excuse me, we've got a craft coming your way. It's not working very well. It might come down. We don't. Somewhere in the South Wales area. We're not sure, but somewhere around there. We don't. It could be. It could literally be that. We don't know. But these aircraft were flying around for a couple of days before anything strange happened, and then in the early hours of the morning, a strange pyramid, like a giant tetrahedron-shaped craft, a pyramid with a triangular base, made from triangles that had a slightly rounded base, appeared in the sky above the village, and it was surrounded by lights, as you see here. It was surrounded by lights. There were several other craft nearby, barrel-shaped craft, green ones, red ones, flying all over the place. Some of them came quite close to the witnesses. And also what appeared to be electric discharges, like lightning bolts. We don't know if that's actually what they were, but that's what they looked like. That's how the witness described them. And this was visible for about 2.5 minutes, but then it just vanished. But there were aircraft nearby dealing with it. And what's more, the very next day, some very strange people appeared in the area. Not men in black, but some tents were set up in the field near where above which, because this thing was hovering in the sky. Some people with tents. Now these were people dressed in overalls, like forensic detective type people. And several people in the village saw them, and I spoke to another independent witness who said she thought that they were a film crew for filming Doctor Who. Because apparently Doctor Who had been filmed in that area, Garth Mountain in South Wales, was actually a location shot for Doctor Who. Several episodes of Doctor Who were shot there. She just thought that was the same thing again. But it wasn't. There were some people there, in overalls. They had strange equipment with them. They had a van. And they were very, very cagey. They had a guard dog with them. It was very, very aggressive towards the passers-by, people walking, people rambling in the area. And several armed men, guys with guns. They said they were from Vodafone. We're from Vodafone, go away. I like it. You ever seen guys from Vodafone? With SA-80 rifles slung over their shoulder?
Not yet.
No. So that's basically what happened. It was very strange. And they were there for a few days as if they were looking for something. It was almost like a search team. And at the same time, in a nearby forest, a few miles away, there was another group of people that were doing something similar. And a vast area of the forest was cleared. They said it was because of larch disease, which is a deadly fungal infection which kills trees. And a group of people there said they're just clearing the area for larch infection. But that's not true, because there were no warning signs, there was nothing indicating, there was no precautions taken which you would take if there was larch disease in that wood. So they were clearing the forest for something else. And the investigator, Gary Jones, who's been looking into this, believes that some object came down in the woods, a fragment, either a UFO or a fragment of some extraterrestrial object came down in those woods, and it was salvaged by the government. This means not only did the government have foreknowledge that these events happened, because that's what I believe it was. There's other researchers who claim it was something different. They said it was some kind of exercise to do with the Royal Mint. Having looked into this, I don't agree. I think there was something very, very strange there happened indeed. It means that if that is the case, then it means that the government have foreknowledge over these particular objects appearing. And it also means that if fragments of these intelligently designed extraterrestrial objects hit the Earth, if these artifacts actually come down to the Earth, they will take them away when no one can see them to maintain the cover-up. Because obviously a piece of a UFO is decisive physical evidence, which if it got into the news, would make it obvious that we're not alone, and there's something intelligent out there. And if that ever happened, well, I don't know. That's something that's a scenario I had to think about when I was writing my books over there. Roswell Rising, a novel of disclosure, and its sequel, Roswell Revealed, a world after disclosure. Because I had to think about what would happen if the cover-up failed, if we got the truth instead of lies. And so that's kind of what, this has been going through my head an awful lot in the last couple of years while I was writing those books. If you want one, incidentally, they're £10 each, or £15 for both of them. If you love UFOs and Roswell and exopolitics and disclosure and things like that, you'll really enjoy those books. You'll find them great. But that's all I've really got to say in this lead-off, and so I'll open the floor to you guys if you want to say anything. Anybody?
Yeah.
Dave?
Yeah. I was just having a brief discussion. I was just having a brief discussion with Charles just before we started about Billy Meyer. What's your take on the whole Billy Meyer case? I don't know how many people actually know about that one.
I'm not actually sure. I know that David Griffin has looked into this in detail, another researcher guy I know. Because there's several people who say that he's created fake images of UFOs. He's created models, basically, and he's filmed them. Griffin doesn't agree, and I think I'd have to look into it a bit more to know for sure. That's what I do.
I think he's the real deal, Billy Meyer.
You do, Richard, you do. All right. What makes you think he's real, Richard?
Well, this one-armed farmer from northern Switzerland would have to be an expert in about 60 different disciplines of image production, way before the likes of Photoshop, computer images or anything like that. I think he did make some models of what he saw. I think he did try and fabricate some photographs, which didn't go very well, but you know, it takes away from his experience that did happen. And Wendell Stevens had a look at some of the photographs. You can see his video on YouTube, and some of the photographs from his journeys around the solar system are actually quite good. I think he's got dinosaurs in some of them, and there's a satellite around Mars in one of them as well.
Satellite around Mars. Yeah, I mean, he rather like a George Adamski, you know, he claims to have been taken into craft, and he's been actually given rides in these craft, hasn't he? If that's the guy I'm thinking of.
Yeah. Sorry, can I just... There was a claim that he went back, the Palladians took him back in time to meet Jesus.
Oh, right.
He took a photograph.
A photograph of Jesus?
There's a photograph of Jesus with two of his disciples, and somebody found a painting that was actually from film from the 1920s, an early film about Christ.
Is that where he got it from?
Well, that's what you reckon.
Oh dear. See, I mean, if he's for real, and he may well be, Richard, you know, he may well be for real, it's better just to stick with the evidence you have and not try to, because I know some people, I mean, this is something that a ghost guy Ross Hemsworth, who does ghost hunting videos and ghost hunting TV programs that I know, he was told, we are going to have to spice, he was told by the producers, yeah, we go out there and do these ghost investigations, but we might need to spice up some of the cases with a bit of, you know, extra, you know, bogus evidence. But if you do that, it just ruins the good evidence that you have.
It's disingenuous.
Yeah, it is. Hi there.
I saw a saucer ship in the 50s, and the lights were exactly that colour.
You saw a saucer, flying saucer?
Yes, it hovered. I was with friends, and we were going to a meditation meeting in a person's house, and we all looked up, and the saucer was just, well, it looked above us, but it wouldn't be, and the lights were exactly that colour.
All right, that's pretty amazing, because this is an image created by the Swansea UFO Network.
Yeah.
And that's...
But they were that colour, that yellow and colour.
All right. Oh, cool. Have you reported your sighting to anyone? No. It may be worth, like, I mean, I know it was a long time ago, but if you can write it down, it may be worth reporting it to one of the UFO reporting databases.
Right, okay.
Okay, thanks very much for sharing that. Thank you very much. Hi there.
Paul Hellier says at least 4 alien species are visiting the Earth, and he's got his information from what he thinks is reliable military sources, but he's aware of disinformation still. However, he goes along with what he thinks is the truth. And from his sources, he says it's the Palladians, Andromedans, Zeta Reticuli, and I've forgotten where the tall whites come from. What's your take on that? And what do the Palladians and Andromedans look like? Because I know what the Greys look like. But
And I don't know. I know there are different types of ET that have been reported. I mean, Hellier mentioned 4 types, 4 different species, but actually there are over 100 that have currently been documented. There's virtually a taxonomy of these creatures. There's the small whites, the small greys, the medium greys, the large greys. There's the Nordics, there's the mantids, there's the little blue creatures, and there's all kinds of different beings. And they're seen by independent people across the world. This can't be explained as some kind of cultural meme, because they're seen in Nottingham, in Nevada, and Nigeria, and lots of other places like that, by different people from different cultures.
From your research,
Yeah.
I know there's 100 different species, but from your research, which species are you very confident are visiting the Earth?
Certainly the most common varieties, the Nordics, the Greys, things like that. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know that people give them names. They name them after constellations and things like that. I don't know if that's the correct name for these creatures, but I know they exist. I know lots of people have seen them. Too many for it to simply be something made up. Too many credible people have reported encounters and contact experiences for it to be some kind of hoax or some kind of delusion. Researchers like Dr. John Mack and Bud Hopkins and others have really, I think, proved their case. But I mean, I know that the main ones, the ones that are reported most often, the ones most likely to be visiting, in my view.
There were supposed to be Nordics in the Nazi concentration camps.
Right.
And they're reported to have 24 teeth.
Oh right, yeah, there's a guy called Colonel Charles Hall who talks about the Norwegians with 24 teeth. Now, this is odd because humans have 32 teeth. So these are very human-looking beings. Now, Colonel Charles Hall was actually a meteorologist. He was a weatherman, and he was the chief weather forecaster for Area 51. And he ran the weather station there. And he said that around where his weather station was, creatures were living, which he describes, as you were saying, Nordic-type creatures. He called them Norwegians with 24 teeth. But I know the Nazis were very much involved in this. There was like Sylvia Ortiz, who was a medium, a psychic, who worked for them. And there was Heinrich Himmler, was head of the SS. He was very interested in black magic and things like that, and did various rituals. And of course, they were very keen on esoteric technology. They developed anti-gravity, free energy propulsion, which literally, I mean, they were on the point of getting to the point, if they developed this completely, they could have turned the war around. Well, what happened was when they were destroyed at the end of the war, when their regime fell, the victorious Allies took that technology and continued to develop in the secret, and maybe some of the other things as well that you mentioned. Maybe that explains, maybe these creatures that Hall was talking about at Area 51 didn't come, maybe they may have originally come from other worlds, but maybe they got them from Germany. I wonder. Yeah, that's interesting. Anybody else?
We also had a huge installation underneath the Antarctic, which
Yeah.
is still there.
Yeah, and there's several people I know who've talked about strange things being buried under the ice there. And there's some pyramids as well. Stone pyramidal structures, which are very regular, just like the ones in Egypt. They're slightly bigger than the ones in Egypt. And they're in an area that's never been visited, it's never been explored. They've only ever been photographed from the air and from satellite. But I'd love to go there. Maybe some expedition will get there, but I bet you, if someone actually says they want to go there, I bet they'll be denied permission, because the Antarctica is completely controlled by government outfits. So,
Which is suspicious in itself.
yeah, you can't just go there and walk to wherever you want to go. You have to get permission, things like that. It has to be cleared. And so far, no one's ever been near these pyramids. Yeah. Richard, you want to say something?
Oh, it was just about the Emlyn-Jones thing. Has Hoagland spoke about it yet on any level?
I haven't heard him, which is odd, because normally he's very vocal on things like this.
First thing, and I haven't heard anything by him about that.
No. I haven't heard Hoagland say a word about Emlyn-Jones, which is uncharacteristic for him, because he usually he's usually very vocal on things like this, and he sometimes comes out with some ideas which I think are a bit speculative and rather illogical sometimes. Although I think he is right about, especially the stuff he says about Mars. I think he's correct about.
Oh yeah, he's right about a lot of stuff. I just found it strange that he stayed silent about something.
Yeah, I do find it odd that he's silent about this. So I do wonder why he's quiet. Is he ill? Do you think? Maybe it's because he's ill or something?
Maybe.
I haven't heard he was ill. So if anyone's heard Richard Hoagland say anything about Emlyn-Jones, I'd be interested to find out. 'Cause Project Camelot have covered it. All the usual suspects, if that's the right word, have said stuff about this. And, why not old Richie? Why is he silent? A question, isn't it? Oh yeah.
On a more spiritual level, there is a theory that this is supposed to be this Ashtar Command spaceship above the Earth, and it's supposed to be communicating with people. What's your opinion on that?
The Ashtar Command thing is very interesting because it goes back to an incident in 1977 in this country, where people were watching a TV one evening, and just after 5 PM there was like children's programs on, and suddenly this strange voice came over, and you can actually get it. It was recorded. You can get it on YouTube, and someone says this is the voice of Ashtar Command, and they go on to deliver a long speech about their concern about humans' use of nuclear weapons and environmental destruction and things like this. And this is a common theme which extraterrestrials often talk about people, which extraterrestrials often talk about when they actually having contact with people. They often mention nuclear, say you're using nuclear weapons, that's bad, you're destroying the environment, you mustn't do that, things like that. And this, I think it went on for about 3 minutes, this particular incident, and then it was just sound, there was no image, the TV picture was normal, it was just sound only. But then it went back to the normal programs. Now, it was worked out in the actual... The explanation, they immediately had an announcer come on. I'm very, very sorry, it appears we were jammed by another signal. But it turns out that 3 separate transmitters were jammed in Hampshire, in Surrey, I believe, somewhere in that area, in the south of London, and in the Hampshire in that area, in the south of England. They were all jammed together. And if you ask people about it now, they say this #command thing, it was a hoax by students. I don't know why students get blamed for these things all the time. But the thing is that no one knows it was a hoax by students because the case was never solved. The police investigated and they couldn't find anyone, because in order to jam a TV signal, even in the pre-digital age, was difficult. Really difficult. You would need a very, very powerful transmitter to override that coming from the regular transmitters. You need to be able to interfere with the signal, all kinds of things like that. And that's a very, very difficult thing to do, especially for 3 separate transmitters across the south of England. And no one was arrested, because if someone had this kind of equipment, and they got hold of this equipment, it shouldn't be hard for the police to trace it. They had a recording of the actual event at the TV studio. No one's ever been arrested for this. The case was closed. No one's ever confessed, which is odd, because after all this time, I mean, the "I fooled the world" meme is absolutely, it's a gold mine, isn't it? Look at Ray Santilli. So I think possibly that's something real. An #command may be a real thing. I don't know.
It's a lot of sensitive people are supposed to be receiving communication psychically or telepathically from the #command. It's still going on now.
Oh right, yeah. I mean, I've seen there's several websites for #command. I've not looked at them in detail.
One of the proposals at the minute of these people is that the beings are supposed to go and pour all this money into everybody's bank account and all the debt in the world will be wiped out. We keep looking to see when they're going to get all this money.
Well, I'll give them my number. that's good news. Oh yeah, but I mean, it's going to be an awful lot. To pay off all the debt in the world, it will literally take an extraterrestrial source, because there's not enough raw capital on Earth to ever cover the debt, even a fraction of the debt that actually exists. So I hope they get on with it. I really do. But that's interesting. Thanks very much for that extra information.
I think, you can't prove or disprove it. I'll go with #command. It probably does exist, but you have to be aware of some websites aren't genuine. Some websites are, and some aren't about #.
It's like the crop circles. Yeah. I mean, I would never pretend that all crop circles are made by aliens. I know that the majority are made by humans. I know several people who make them. One of them's a friend of mine, and they're forms of landscape art. But this doesn't mean that all the crop circles are made by humans either. I don't believe in the 100% man-made hypothesis.
I'll tell you something. I'm a farmer, and I grow wheat, barley, and oilseed. And I go to Wiltshire every year, Avebury, Stonehenge, Glastonbury every year, and I know they're not all human-made, because I've seen a wheat crop second node on the wheat stem, all bent on the second node.
Yeah.
And that's about that far off the soil surface.
That's
you
weird.
can't do that with a plank of wood.
Yeah.
And I've had my evidence that unless I see humans bending it at the second node and nowhere else, and I choose to believe it's non-human.
Well, I actually asked this guy I know who's a crop circle maker. I said, I brought up a case like that, and I said, "Do you know how do you do that?" And he says, "Oh, we know how to do that. It's made by humans. We do that." And I said, "How do you do it?" And he says, "I can't tell you."
Is that Matthew Williams?
I don't want to mention names, but
Well,
he's very loud and noisy.
He's a liar. He works for the government.
Yeah.
I've been in some of them. They weren't made by people.
Yeah.
Well, it's possible.
I mean, if he
But he
says,
stood there and said he made that his few crops. He wasn't even challenged.
this person actually said, I know how this is done. But when I said, well, how is it done? He says, can't tell you, trade secret. Well, that's not an answer. That's not an explanation. Why should I believe him if he's not going to reveal it? So yeah, it is similar to the #command thing in the same way. Yeah.
The Roswell stone, there was a crop circle, was it 30 years before the Roswell stone that was identical to the pattern on the Roswell stone?
The Roswell stone? What's the Roswell stone?
It was found at Roswell and they've analysed it. It has magnetic particles in it.
Oh, right.
But there was a crop circle, I think it was something like 30 years before, but was identical.
Oh, right, this is before the Roswell
Yeah.
Stone thing. Right, I've not heard of the Roswell Stones. I thought I was such an anorak. I'd heard about it, but if that in that case, then how did the crop circle makers know that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the only thing I would say against it is the bloke who found the Roswell stone is just, he's an idiot.
Oh, right. See, okay.
He doesn't do himself any favours.
Right.
But I mean, I spoke to double barrel. Yeah, Linda Bolton, how about it? She's adamant
Yeah.
that there's something about it. You can put it in your hands and your hand will move it.
Oh, right. I mean, obviously, if this is like Linda Moulton Howe's an interesting person, and I watch most of what she does because she's very interesting, and I'd have to find out more about that. But if there's evidence this thing is real, then
well, they've tried to analyse it, and certainly not. They cannot say that's from outer space, but there's particles in it that they cannot explain.
strange, isn't it? Yeah. And I mean, that's an interesting point of view. That's an interesting thing that's happened. I think. Oh yeah.
With your experience of Roswell, what's your views on Bob Lazar?
I'm not still. Actually, I've sort of come a bit full circle there because he's. I looked at when he first appeared. I was very interested in what he had to say, and I thought it sounded quite realistic. And I listened to several people talking about him, and like George Knapp and people like that, and they were quite convinced by him. There's a lot of reasons to think he's for real, and there was some doubt spread on it, shed on the whole thing. Like I know Stanton Friedman is convinced that Lazar's a liar and made the whole thing up. But since then, there's other people who come forward and talked about it, and I'm not so sure that it's not real, because I did believe Friedman for a while, and I thought this guy's just making it up. But there's a new, I think I'll know more perhaps when I've seen the new documentary by Jeremy Corbell. 3rd of December, that's going to hit iTunes, and I'm looking forward to that very much. I want to see that.
Do you think though, since the 1950s, there's been a drip feed of information, technology? I mean, we know how far we've come since the 50s with televisions and computers and things like that. And is that not possible reverse engineering from what he found?
It could be. I've read Colonel Corso's book, The Day After Roswell, and I found a lot of it. Oh, thanks, Maureen, thank you. And I found a lot of it was didn't make any sense to me, like the whole Roswell story and about how he was. Some guy turned up in a lorry at his base, and they said, "Oh, put these boxes to one side. We're just going to use the toilet," and things like that. As if that would actually happen for something real like that. I
don't know the full truth of his history, but he claims he was a genius in university. He was picked out at university and they said, "Look, this is craft. We want you to. You're the best brain for to do this. We want you to back engineer it."
He could be. He claims that he was trained as a nuclear physicist, and that all his records were destroyed, and he was basically unpersoned when he went public. And he said the only reason he's still alive is because he went public, and no one would dare touch him after that. But I mean, Friedman said because he claims to have trained at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and Stanton Friedman went there and asked around and said if anyone had heard of Bob Lazar. He asked people who'd supposedly been in his class, "Do you remember this guy?" And they said no. But then again, I know that someone else did the same thing, and he did find a couple of people who remembered him. So I don't know. It's hard to know for sure.
I think Bob Lazar's just been caught out embellishing his CV the same like anybody else would. You know, if you want the job, you're going to embellish your CV a bit to get the job, and I think he's just fell foul of. Someone going, "Oh well, you didn't do this and you didn't do that." When you have your CV scrutinised and people find out you don't have that GCSE in biology,
It could be again like with Billy Meyer. It would be better if he just stuck to the facts, and he's not helping himself by sexing up this whole particular event, because it just discredits the real stuff, if any real stuff he has. And I know he's a bit of a showman. I've seen, if you look at his life story.
I mean, he built an atom smasher in his back garden. He can't exactly be thick, you know. He's building an atom smasher in your back.
He built a jet-powered racing car as well.
Yeah.
So he obviously must have some engineering training to do that.
In court, Bob Lazar was shown to work for the Navy.
Yes.
Intelligence or whatever.
He was. Well, he had a pay slip and a tax form, and they always say, you know, tax. Or if you want to know any indelible records, just go to the tax office. He did work at the Skunk Works. I think was it some Skunk Works, Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, or was it some Los Alamos National Laboratory? Yeah, and he has I think it's Department of the Office of Naval Intelligence has a payslip indicating he was attached to the Office of Naval Intelligence.
That was in court as well.
Yeah. What's more, he's passed numerous polygraph examinations, and they are, as anyone who's been following the development of the film Cable Green will know, they are very, very today they're very, very sophisticated, and they're almost impossible to break. And there's a few people with special mind training, things like that, and concentration. But it's almost impossible to break them.
It's on YouTube, and he's got hydrogen from water. Have you seen? It was on Rich Planet as well.
Yeah.
Talking about Bob Lazar, and he's able to extract hydrogen from H2O.
Well, I mean that's
located to where the Chicago car manufacturers are.
Getting hydrogen from water is actually not that difficult. You can do it. I did it when I was at school. You use electrolysis. You can also heat the water up, heat the steam. If you have steam, you can heat it up to a very high temperature above, by putting it through a fire. You know, putting it like the pipes through a fire, and that will separate the hydrogen and oxygen. So I mean, but I'll look more. Do you mean was it some sort of nuclear reaction, or was it like just something simple he did?
Yeah, he manufactures his own particle accelerator for, was it, I've forgotten what it was.
Yeah, that's the one he built in his back garden, his particle accelerator.
It was an element that was illegal because it was using nuclear weapons.
Right.
But the actual particle itself wasn't dangerous, you know. But it was just part of a nuclear weapon.
Interestingly, he lives in an old nuclear bunker. He bought it off, but the government was selling off these. Well, at the end of the Cold War, when they started shutting down the nuclear weapons facilities and they were reducing their size and number, they sold a few off of them as cheap homes. And for anyone who wants to live 60 feet underground, and Bob Lazar said, "I'll have one of them." So he bought this old nuclear bunker and he's living in it.
I think the intelligence agencies are trying to muddy the waters of Bob Lazar. I think they've got a hand in this as well.
Jim Marsden, whenever you see technology publicly, he says the Navy intelligence are 40 years at least ahead of us.
I can well believe it because Steve Mera said
probably more now.
Because Steve Mera was working on computers for NATO in the 80s, and he said that there were several machines he dealt with which only matched the sophistication of the modern computers recently in the public arena.
In relation to flying craft, Jim Mars also says that helium-3 is abundant on the moon.
Yeah.
And helium-3 has the same properties as uranium, except you don't get depleted helium-3, you just get oxygen coming away from it.
It's very interesting, it has to be used as a fuel.
So it could, for instance, he says an old space shuttle flying the moon, coming back with a shuttle load, would run the atomic power stations in America for a year.
Yeah.
One journey.
And they wouldn't there'd be no toxic waste.
Yeah, because of that, the Chinese and the Indians know this. And there is going to be, if it's not already happening, there's going to be a space race to the moon.
There's already
deuterium, helium-3 fusion, but you still need to produce the deuterium, which is heavy water, which is quite
hard.
But
if you watch the film Moon, it's all about a miner who was a lone miner on the moon. And he's mining helium-3 basically, and when there's a pack ready, someone comes up and takes it back.
I'd be interested to see that, because if it's been talked about in science fiction and they're talking about it speculatively in the public arena, you can bet in secret it's going on from real, because 40 years ahead. I mean, I've got no doubt that many UFOs that not all of them, but many of them will be put down to extraterrestrial craft are actually secret government technology. Not all of them, but some of them.
Gene Roddenberry wrote Star Trek.
Yeah.
He knew that the government had this stuff, or they were going to have this stuff. and he says whatever you think they've got are 300 years ahead.
I can well believe it. I mean, Gene Roddenberry was involved in psychic experimentation as well. He was involved in channeling. There's a book called The Only Planet of Choice, which was worth reading. Morning, Maureen.
Hi Ben. Last night David Icke mentioned, you know, about the AI agenda that seems to be prolific at the moment, where humans are going to be more robotic than human, and eventually Elon Musk said this could kill off humans, but we should go for it.
Yeah.
And David Icke did propose, could this be an alien agenda? Could aliens be behind this?
There's something on this
Yeah.
planet.
Oh, I think that's absolutely
It's all about
possible.
what they've got. They know when you meditate. I've talked about that at the group.
Right.
So I've had a helicopter sat out the back. That was at the back of my son's house.
That's interesting because
There's a lot of other things happening. They know when you're doing it.
there's a guy in Oxford. I'll come to you in a minute because there's a guy in Oxford who had that as well. But more in the aliens. I mean, David doesn't actually mention it in as many words now, but he has made some suggestions that the ruling classes of the Earth are actually, some of them are not human, and they are actually some form of extraterrestrial intelligence and non-human intelligence that is operating on planet Earth. And I think he's telling the truth. He's looked into this in detail. He's documented it in his books, which are quite extraordinary. And I even met someone once who said she was married to a man who was a reptilian shapeshifter. And she wrote a book under a pseudonym actually before she died. She actually drowned when she was swimming in the sea. Doesn't seem to be anything suspicious about that, by the way. But her story is quite incredible, and it can't be proven. But having spoken to her and sort of getting to know her a bit, I'm inclined to believe her. She sounds credible. I've met people, I think, who I get the feeling they're talking nonsense. I don't think she's one of them. But it is. I mean, I'll say more about the AI business tomorrow because I'll go into that in detail in tomorrow's event. If you can get here tomorrow afternoon, I'll talk about that in more detail. But yeah, that's an interesting point, Maureen. And you as well. I thought your name. Sorry, Tony. There's a guy in Oxford who actually had that. He had an experience. You mentioned meditation. With him, it was using a cloudbuster. But there's a lot of similarities in the effect. And again, helicopters flying low over his house. Very strange indeed.
I've had a lot of stuff going on, but it's when you take them, you try and take them on. I don't think they're human.
Yeah, it's makes you wonder, how do they know?
What's a cloudbuster?
A cloudbuster is a device used to channel orgone energy, which is something discovered by Wilhelm Reich, who was actually a psychoanalyst, part of the Sigmund Freud circle, who developed his own ideas. And it included in what he believed was an energy, a non-electromagnetic energy of a type different to what we've used to, different to the known forms of energy. And he found various ways of using this energy through various machines that he built. And one of those was called a cloudbuster, which is basically if you use metal pipes. It's a very simple device using metal pipes which you put into groundwater, something from a well in the ground, and you can actually, the orgone energy will actually affect the weather. It'll actually change the weather. You can make clouds or you can disperse clouds. And he very successfully went around breaking. There was a massive drought over large parts of North America I believe it was in the 1940s, and he went around with his cloudbuster, basically creating rain. He created rain clouds and it started raining, and he broke the drought. That's when the government decided to keep an eye on him, and he ended up being jailed on a trumped-up charge. And in 1957, he died in prison a week before he was due to be released. The actual story is told in a rock video. It's actually Kate Bush.
Andrew Johnson does a DVD with him.
Yeah, if you're familiar with Kate Bush, she made a song called Cloudbusting, and a video, which was filmed at White Horse Hill in Oxfordshire, which is one of my favourite places. And in musical form, it tells the story of Wilhelm Reich. And Donald Sutherland is in it, it's very unusual you get a big movie actor in a music video. Very, very interesting. I saw that when I was a little kid, and it had an enormous effect on me. I remember I was just in the cinema watching a movie, and I was a little kid, and they put this video on beforehand, before the main feature, and it enchanted me, it hypnotised me. I had dreams about it for years. And I didn't know who Wilhelm Reich was back then. I was just like 10 years old or something. But it's an amazing thing to watch, and it's a great song and a fantastic video. But that's what a cloudbuster is. And I've got a friend of mine in Oxfordshire, in Abingdon, who's a cloudbuster operator. Nick Hayes, his name is. And he's had helicopters flying over his house again, and I think there's a similarity to meditation. Yeah, Maureen?
Locally speaking, do you want to tell people about the gated grave?
This is something investigated by Richard Hall. But there's a chap called Robert Hall, no relation, who he was a small boy, and in 1940, a long time ago, he had an encounter in Gateshead. It was one of the streets by the railway line near the main. I don't know the area. I don't know the actual name. Yeah, it's that. There's a railway line there that goes through Gateshead, and he actually lived his whole life in the house, and it hasn't changed much actually since then. If you go down there, it's pretty much as it was back then, except there's a metal fence on the side of the railway line. There used to be a wooden fence, it's now a metal fence. But he and his friends were playing one day, and lots of strange things happened, including the appearance of a craft, the appearance of various aliens, and some kind of force field. And then an alien actually chased him, like a grey alien, and his Uncle Joe, I think his name is Joe, whacked it with a coal shovel at a coal yard. And Robert Hall, I don't know if he's still alive. This was back in 2002. But it's one of Richard's first investigations. But he never ever changed his story, and he was very, very clear about it. And he doesn't seem, without being rude to him, he doesn't seem like the kind of guy who'd be able to make something like this up. He's quite an ingenuous sort of person. He wouldn't be able to make up something like this. He's not that sophisticated to make stuff up. And his testimony was analysed by Daryl Sims, who's an investigator, several other people. They think he's telling the truth. He came up with some ideas which would be not the sort of thing that would be made up by someone in the 1940s, because that idea didn't exist. That is that the craft seemed to have a bigger interior, it was like a TARDIS. And according to him, the alien was taken by the police, and because it was the dead alien, after being hit by the coal shovel, it was killed, and was put in the basement of the local church. I don't know what the name of the church now is. I think it's been deconsecrated and it's something else now.
It's plastic the other day.
Is it? Yeah, it's if you go down the steps at the side, there's a basement, and I think it's full of rubbish now, and it's half flooded. But back then, I mean, I went down there myself once because Richard took me there. But I couldn't. It was dark, and I didn't want to go down there, and you couldn't see what was going on. But Richard's filmed down there, and it's like. It's all dirty and derelict now, but that was used as a storage room back then. They put the alien under there, they kept it there for a while, and then presumably the government took it away. Because these Roswell crash retrieval situations are not. There's many that predate Roswell itself.
There was one in South Africa when I was there. They told us about.
Yeah, 1989.
It was in the news.
That was 1989, wasn't it?
I don't know. Just the lad I was working with told us. This is a joke.
Yeah.
I said, what happened with the spacecraft? And said they come from America with a truck and took it away. Which
was that the Kalahari incident?
X-Files.
Yeah, there was at least one I know of in South Africa. It seems.
They all knew about it. It was in the news.
Yeah, I mean, again, is it surviving any archives that you're aware of?
No, I never bothered trying to. I was just surprised when he told us.
But a lot of people talk. Tony Dodd, who's now passed away, he managed to blag his way into talking to some high up colonel in the military back then. And I don't know, God knows how he did it. He was a policeman, he was quite good at things like that. But this guy was talking quite openly about the craft that crashed in the Kalahari Desert, and it had been retrieved, and the Americans were coming to pick it up. And he described the aliens having, strange shaped heads, the shape of the heads and the colour of the skin and things like that. It's very strange, very odd. There may have been other events like that. There are probably many crash retrieval events that go unreported.
Mike Barra, I was speaking to him, and he says he knows that there's definitely been at least 4. There's 4 that he says is definite.
These appear to be regular events. There's a book by a guy called Christopher Ryan, I think his name is. It's called Magic Eyes Only, and it documents the whole over through the 20th century, and there's like 100, which means on average of one per year. And these are regular events, and there appears to be some kind of global policy in place for when these events happen, which every single nation state obeys. And it seems to be the United States is like the central organiser of this policy, because whenever these things happen anywhere in the world, they're often, you know, a US Air Force plane will arrive and pick them up. Even if there's one, there was in Brazil in 1996. There was several other events where Americans came along and picked it up. The South African event, Americans came along and picked them up. So obviously, if this policy was not in place, then we'd be very quick. The truth embargo, as Stephen Bassett calls it, would very quickly flounder. Because obviously, if there's a flying saucer comes down in a local park, like in the day the Earth stood still, and aliens come out of it, and there's news people, you know, the news reporters are there to photograph it. You can't pretend there's no such thing as aliens, can you? I mean, I'm sure some people will, but no. I mean, that'd be it, wouldn't it? We'd all know, and then the government don't want us to know that for various reasons. I explore that in my book actually. There's in fictional allegory, I tell the entire. I believe I cover the entire issue in detail in the books, in the 2 books I've written there.
You just mentioned Steve Bassett, and I don't know if you saw Rich Planet's last Finding the Secret Space program.
I did, yeah.
Well, when Steve Bassett was on stage, he gave the wrong description of 9/11, and when he came off stage, he was questioned by Richard Hall, and he said to him, off stage, whispering, I've been told what to do. You know, as if to say, well, yeah, he was saying someone higher ups told him you're not to spill the beans about the truth of 9/11. So,
yeah.
And he actually said that to Richard Hall, and I believe Richard Hall. So it's interesting what's going on.
I can well believe it too, because I've interviewed Stephen Bassett myself on my radio show, and I actually did tackle the issue that Paul Hellyer brings up over 9/11. And Bassett was very reluctant indeed to talk about it, and he said, I will not discuss anything that does any harm to the truth embargo, and I think this does. Which means, I mean, when he says I've been told not to say this, my guess is I don't believe he says, well, I'm involved in a cover-up and I've been told to say this to maintain the cover-up. I think what he means is I'm in touch with people in government and who are trying to bring an end to the truth embargo, this disclosure process. And one of the things they've said to me is that if, you know, in order to achieve this advocacy process that you're involved in, Steve, you need to keep quiet about 9/11 and not mention 9/11. He said, okay, because that's his prime goal. I think that's a mistake, and I think he's being used in that case.
Suggest whoever's telling him that are dark people.
Yeah.
You know, why they want to suppress the truth about energy weapons.
Exactly, I mean, Steve...
it's a trade-off, that. It's a conscience trade-off. You're selling off your conscience to do that, because they want to keep something that would... Once the truth of 9/11 is exposed, then people... It's like a lot of Americans don't want to believe that their government would conspire against them to do that particular event.
Yeah.
It's Project Fear, it's keeping people in line. That's why people pander to the Americans in crash retrievals as well, because they've got all this fantastic technology that people like South Africa, for instance, just couldn't compete. Of course they're going to let them come and pick their UFOs up and stuff. 9/11, again, what happened the day before? What did Donald Rumsfeld say? Part account for $2.3 trillion, which probably went a lot of it to the secret space program.
Yeah, and he probably announced that because he knew what would happen the next day, and that would be buried, and that news would be buried.
I think it's a tedious link to ufology, 9/11, and that's why they'd want to keep it.
Yeah, and obviously 12.
As well.
Oh, that's another key point. Yeah, obviously 12.3 trillion, or how much 12 point whatever trillion it was.
No, it was 2.3 trillion.
2.3 trillion. Obviously,
there was a lot back then.
That's not loose change.
But that's happened every year subsequently since.
And so that's taxpayers' money, a vast amount of it. And the question is, what do the auditors have to say about it? And on the subject of Stephen Bassett, I just want to say, I think the guy means well, I don't think I don't think he would be party to any cover-up. I've got to know him actually, and sort of semi-personally, and I don't think he'd be party to any cover-up, which he believed would be detrimental. But on the other hand, I think if he may have been advised by people who say they're in favour of this disclosure that he talks about, who have told him this, and he said, okay, I'll go along with it because we'll have this advocacy process will be achieved. In that case, I think that's a mistake on his part.
I think he's been muddled because the know he's quite influential in the UFO sort of arena, and if they can get to him, he's just another one off the list that they're going to sort of.
And I have a suspicion David Icke is along those lines as well, because he wrote a book in 2001 about 9/11, suggesting it was an energy weapon, and then in 2010, the book with the line in the front, he changed it to something like it was demolition.
Yeah, he said it was true. Yeah.
And so why would he do that? It's very strange that.
He made a statement once on one of his videos quite recently actually, where he said, all we have to agree on is that the official story is fake. It doesn't matter whether we think it was an energy weapon or whether it was controlled demolition. All we have to agree on is the official story is fake. It's pointless to quarrel over what else it might be. But the problem is that if you don't have an alternative narrative, then it's going to spread confusion. It's going to confuse people. People that come into it, they're going to think it's thermite. They're going to think it's explosives. And when that is proven wrong, it may bring them back to the official story. They may think, well, maybe the truth of 9/11 is the official story after all, which may be the purpose of it. Because I think you have to have an alternative narrative. You have to look at what other scientists and other experts have independently gathered from investigating the 9/11 attacks. And people like Dr. Judy Wood, who's done I think the definitive independent investigation. That you have to look at that and say, is it true or is it false? My view, it's true. In which case, say it's true. And if that's the case, then people who have other ideas about how, in terms of the alternative to the mainstream narrative from the official sources, they're incorrect. And you have to say they're incorrect. So
they're using them weapons now in California.
Oh, the fires.
There's some stuff on YouTube and that I get sent stuff.
Yeah, I know. And Andrew Johnson, I know, has a different view on this, but I mean, I've not.
Well, there's cars on the beach. They drove on the beach. And there's no trees or anything.
Yeah.
And the people were roasted in the cars.
Yeah, and then some of the houses have come down, and the trees are not damaged.
Yeah. Then the house cut in half. That's on the Facebook.
Well, that's exactly like Dr. Judy Wood's book, isn't it?
Yes.
It's exactly what you say there. Hi there.
Yeah, it's interesting talking about that in California, is that they've created the pathway for the new multi-fast rail along the Californian coast. It's everywhere where the fires are is exactly where they need to be to put the high-speed rail in.
Is that so?
Yeah, that's on one of the sites.
That's not coincidence, isn't it?
It's posted on Facebook just this week.
I wonder if something similar to that might happen on the course of HS2. You keep an eye out for that.
Do you know they've cladded all
if it
around
works in California
with this cladding, then they're all joined together, these terraced houses, and they want to put smart meters in them. And they're blaming the smart meters for fires all over.
Oh God, yeah, I'm trying to persuade my landlord.
What you're living in at the minute, it's unbelievable. Because if hitting this directed energy, they can kill who they want.
Well, that's an interesting point. I'm trying to persuade my landlord not to have a smart meter at the moment. I really am.
If we go back to Rumsfeld, what people might not be picking up on is the fact that when the missile hit the Pentagon, the paperwork in relation to the money wasn't the obvious that it did.
So all the evidence side of the Pentagon perfectly safe.
It counts the
So all the paperwork in relation to the missing money did, but it didn't, because we watched the original photographs. There was a collapse. Before the collapse, there was a walk, and when it did collapse, there was a telephone book sitting on the stool, and it's not even burnt.
Yeah,
so
that's odd, isn't it?
People are stupid.
The windows either side of the hole where the wings should have went through are intact.
There's all kinds. There's so many anomalies through 9/11. I mean, it's like Dr. Judy Wood's book is like really thick, and it's got a lot of information in there. And because it's such a detailed situation,
They should mention the nano nanothermite paints, because for months beforehand, there was contractors going in, they were supposed to be painting fireproofing on all the metal. So, yes, I agree the weapon disposed of the concrete, etc. But there was the initial collapse, and I think the nanothermite is being used to start the collapse. And then, as the spire shows, when the spire disappears, that's when the weapon came in and just finished up.
So you think it might be a combination of the two?
Well, why not? Because
it's layers,
it didn't
isn't
work.
it? You uncover one there and there's someone else.
If one didn't work, or it could be like a little red herring, you know.
Well, I don't have the information on that to hand, but I think they, from what I've seen, I mean, the thermite story, I've had a look at people talking about it and how some people are convinced it's true, other people are convinced it's not. I mean, I have to see what I have to look that up, but I mean, I don't see why you need more than like the Hutchison effect directed energy weapon.
Yeah.
That seems to be the way it was done.
But Building 7.
No, that was hit by a building. It wasn't hit by a plane, that, but it should not have collapsed in that.
But in Building 7,
turned to dust in that way.
The Enrod inquiry, all the paperwork was in there. So
well, that's convenient, isn't it?
There were several massive inquiries on Gordon, and all the evidence was in Building 7. So when that came down, all the evidence went in.
Apparently, the CIA had an office in there as well, and that was conveniently destroyed.
And the Mayor of New York.
Yeah, his bunker was in there in Building 7.
That was odd, wasn't it?
Yeah, Rudy Giuliani.
Yeah, and he's this guy was an American hero, wasn't he?
Yeah.
For me, you don't even have to read Dr. Judy's word, although that is the definitive answer, I suspect. You just have to look at a video or videos and see solid iron girders falling down through gravity, turning into dust.
They disintegrate.
There's an explanation for that.
Yeah.
All I can think of is the energy weapon. And I believe those videos are genuine and not Photoshop.
Oh, they are. They come from the official news story that was made on the day. And there's this guy in Canada, John Hutchison, actually created these effects in his laboratory, which we observe at the World Trade Center. Not only that, but Hutchison was investigated in 1983 by a guy called Colonel John Alexander, who was head of DARPA, and he spent a couple of months with Hutchison. And shortly after that, Hutchison got in his trouble, and he was put in prison for a while, I think. And the Canadian government stole his equipment.
It was just parking tickets he got put in jail for.
It sounds like a trumped up case.
Parking.
It sounds like a trumped up case, and I expect that
traces back to what is to Bassett though, because if they've told Bassett not to say anything about 9/11, the truth about 9/11, then we know that the truth behind that is an energy weapon. So that if it's an energy weapon, then that links to freight energy, and that basically is the can of worms open.
Yes.
So you can trace it all back.
Well, I think the massive subject is asbestos. The whole system, all the towers are full of asbestos. Well, you know, when the towers came down, all the 9/11 responders were asbestosis. So there must be quite a bit of asbestos.
Well, I've heard they were ill. I heard that a lot of the firemen are now sick.
Yeah, there's thousands and thousands have died since.
People in the area who inhaled dust are ill.
More than what lost our life on the day.
So you've got nanoparticles of asbestos going into you, you're going to die of it.
Yeah.
But then again, you get rid of all the witnesses again.
I mean, that's obviously it's a slow demise, but it does the trick.
That's the depth of the lack of feeling, you know.
I'm worried.
I know we've seemed to have jumped from UFOs to 9/11 because obviously there's an interesting subject. What astounded me was, you know, when you've seen the film on the news, and when the plane went through, which is obviously like a road runner, plane went through a steel building, and then the nose came out the other end, and that's when the picture blacked out. They've got fantastic cameras and all that, and suddenly they went on blackout.
Well, I wonder why that was.
Where's all the CCTV? How many CCTVs on the Pentagon?
Must be massive numbers. I mean, the only CCTV footage that's been released is one where you can't really see much what's going on.
4 frames from one camera that doesn't show an error.
Yeah, that's been publicly released. Why don't they publicly release something that proves a plane went in there? Because there were CCTV cameras all around there. Just like there was the night Diana died. there were 17 traffic cameras that should have recorded her final journey. None of them were working. Just a coincidence, nothing to worry about, as David Icke would tell you.
Yeah, but could it have been a hologram?
The plane?
Plane.
I think it was some kind of image, yeah, because
There's a missile.
it was some kind of image.
I mean, that's what David Icke showed last night,
Yeah.
how real it looks to see a hologram. And then something visible. So why could it not have been there?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the Pentagon, I mean, we have people who spotted aircraft in there. A large number of people spotted a plane, a low-flying aircraft, an airliner. Too many to say that it was a cover-up. However, they didn't hit the building. They saw this pass over their head. They didn't see it hit the building.
They can cover up the moon, they can cover up the Twin Towers, can't they?
Yeah, it's and there's all kinds of other weird things. I mean, for example, the plane again. There's no fragments of the plane outside, and when you think some large part of the aircraft would have broken off, and there's several engineers and people like that who commented on that at the Pentagon. So it seems like this was like a magic plane, like the one that went into the building, which you see in the footage, just disappearing into it like a diver diving into a swimming pool. The splash is like a cloud of smoke. It's a very small cloud of smoke. The plane disappears, it merges with the building, and then you. Oh yeah, the
nose of the plane comes out of the side.
I think that was disproved. That was.
Well, I know, but that's when the film went black.
Yeah.
John Day says that was the hologram coming out. They've got the timing wrong.
Yeah, I think that was disproved. It's actually not. But I know that there was. I don't believe it was a real plane. I think there was a film called September Clues, where there's some questions over that. There's the timing of the actual hologram. It was almost like it slowed down or something. It was proved it can't have been actually been the nose of the plane.
Well, on 9/11, the plane sight it shows you there's a pod on the bottom of the plane. It's like the plane's got a pod.
Well, you see a strange object. Some people said it's some kind of strange object underneath, and you see a flash of light just before it hits the building, or it enters the building, or merges with the building. You see a flash of light on this pod. Now, the people in the 9/11 Truth group here in England, the people who believe it was like a real plane, they say, well, that was something to ignite the fuel. It was some kind of detonator. But I suspect it's something more to do with the visual effect of what you're seeing there.
Quite relevant.
Yeah.
You can see the flash. If you look at the front of the plane, at the nose, just before it hits, you can see a flash.
Yeah, you see a flash of light.
Actually, it's also the same effect. I'm not advocating this, by the way. It's the same effect used from this high-powered laser weapon that the US Navy deploys, and it's got the same. When they aim at stuff, it's got a very similar light effect.
Very strange, isn't it?
On the bottom of the plane.
Very strange.
I think that any discussion argument about the plane or what, it is just nonsensical. We know it wasn't a plane at all, because never in the history of architecture on buildings has a plane ever brought a building down. So that in itself is just, that's just,
there's a fire.
it's just nonsense.
There's a fire.
Where the cruise must
Yeah.
have come from,
There's,
wasn't being carried.
There's several occasions where aircraft hit buildings, like in I think it was 1930 or sometime around then. A plane hit the Empire State Building soon after the Empire State Building had been created, and it was like a big bomber just crashed into the building, and you can see a hole. You can see there's burn damage where there was a small fire, but the actual structure of the building was sound, and indeed it stands to this day. There's also been several occasions where buildings have caught fire, large buildings have caught fire. For example, the Windsor Tower in Madrid, and they burnt literally completely out. I mean, everything apart from the steel frame was completely burnt out, but it held. The actual fundamental structure held, and the frame had to be demolished afterwards. So, yeah, I mean, the 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay. So, if for the official story to be true, you'd have to not only have a breakdown of the laws of physics, Captain, but you'd have to have a unique situation that had never been happened before. A plane hitting a building and a fire, and then the building not even collapsing, turning into a huge cloud of dust. I mean, that has never been seen before, it's never been done before.
Getting back to aliens, our history goes back as far as we know. It's written down, and there's miles and miles of books in the Vatican archives that are kept secret. There's
Yeah.
got to be things in there about aliens before we had newspapers.
Definitely. I mean, there's a huge amount of
There's
material.
Yeah, there's something that's just been posted again about, I don't know if it's ex-CIA or NASA pilot who's come out and said, he knows for a fact that he's got all this evidence.
John Lear.
That's 250 million mixed races of aliens on
No, yeah, I was just reading about that.
Yeah.
John Lear said.
Well, you would expect, if, for example, the Earth itself has how many species there are on Earth.
Yeah.
There's about 3 million separate animal species, I think. If you then multiply that by the number of possible planets with life, and I've done an entire presentation on that, called SETI and UFOs, you would expect millions and millions of intelligent creatures capable of building a spacecraft. So what John Lear said makes perfect sense. Wouldn't surprise me at all. And why shouldn't they find us?
And I've got a record, I can remember the day that, I'm old enough to remember the land on the moon. And then as a small child, I looked and I thought, oh, that looks all like interesting and real. That's my fault that I have that.
His grandma said that, didn't she? It was in the studio.
Yeah, and I've always thought that was, couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
It's a light bulb
From your research,
with its own energy power.
from your research, do you think if you hadn't sit on the fence and you've got to say yes or no, do you think extraterrestrials are working with the American military or other militaries around the world?
Yes. If it's a yes or no answer, then the answer is yes. Whether they're working with their role, there's a particular role, I'm not sure of. But from what I've seen, yes, I think probably they are.
I believe it's the case that the elites know all about what's going on, and it gets something like Star Wars, how Yoda talks when you go back to the Babylonian texts that were translated by, yes,
Yeah.
they talk in the same way. So is that coincidence or is that knowledge?
There's
And that was-
prophecies,
yeah.
prophecies were from,
I do wonder where people like George
talked about the images in the sky,
Yeah.
with hologram watched from changing the sun and the moon. And
Zachariah Sitchin.
Zachariah
Zachariah
Sitchin.
Sitchin.
Paintings or
Yes.
UFOs in
Where do they get their
that's
ideas
checking
from?
for this
You've got a better than we did,
millennium.
that,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some similarities to some mythology, especially from ancient India, and what you see in Star Wars. They just talk about battles of the gods and things like this. It's almost as if in a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, which is the tagline of the entire
Can I just say
franchise.
something? Did anybody watch the series V?
Yes.
Yeah, very interesting.
We were just talking about this last night. It just disappeared. It
Yeah.
just stopped.
The reason
Yeah.
we did they've done a newer version.
Right, but
Yeah.
took it off. It was very,
Wasn't the same.
and I wondered why they stopped it mid-episode. It just stopped altogether.
There's a book by Arthur C. Clarke called Childhood's End, which is what inspired the VTV series, and it is basically the same plot. These aliens come down that look remarkably reptilian, and they basically start interacting openly with people on the Earth. And so it's, again, Arthur C. Clarke again. How does he know these things? Where does he get these ideas from? Where does he get this inspiration from? This is a guy who worked very closely with NASA. He predicted, for example, that we would use satellites to communicate with each other long before space rockets were invented. He wrote realistic, in retrospect, realistic stories about voyages to the moon and space stations. Again, before the space age. And it's obvious that he was very closely connected with NASA. He knew about what they were planning and things, and all kinds of strange things like that.
But then also in caves all around the world that they've uncovered and found flying objects, So they've been here forever. So why they've got rid of a huge amount of lies on all these thousands and thousands.
Well, Jim Ross says that he believes about 40% of the inventions in America are actually seized by the Navy intelligence.
That's right, eminent domain. They're covered by that.
Yeah, it's beneficial to the company.
Yeah, they were.
Is Ganesh wearing a breathing apparatus?
Is this the elephant-headed god? He's wearing a...
Is he wearing a breathing apparatus?
This is actually breathing apparatus.
I suppose if you... Yeah, if
You have ancient text.
If you saw something like that, yeah, it would look like that, wouldn't it?
I read, when I was in India, I read the Shiva trilogy, and that talks about the wars of the gods.
Yeah.
And it said that Ganesh and Kali was his sister, and they said that they were mutations from this nuclear.
Yeah. It's amazing they talk about the Vimanas when they describe the design of these Vimanas in detail using mercury and things like that. Is that the end? We're going to have to leave it there, but thanks very much for this. Thanks for coming along and taking time. Thank you.
Really, what it proves here is that there is more questions than answers. But you know, we're getting there. Every bit of it is a part of the way. It's a further step forward. Okay. So without further ado, I think Maureen would like you to.
Oh right, yes. Is this the raffle?
Yeah, if anybody hasn't got tickets and you want to buy some tickets, they're 50 pence a strip. The prizes are on the table there, but you're all 2 tickets. So last chance to get any tickets. What do you want? Strips.
One of the prizes is actually is Roswell Rising, so you can get a free copy there. But you can buy one if you don't win it. Sorry? Oh, this gentleman's got them, yeah.
If I win, I'll fetch it back.
All right, but you've got other things you can win, yeah, you can choose other prizes.
I put all the raffle tickets in the thing before we draw. And don't forget everybody, tomorrow, 3 speakers for the bargain price. Is this on?
Yeah, it should be. Yeah.
Bargain price of £5, and that includes a free raffle and a free cuppa. And if you want more cuppas, you can buy a cuppa and a biscuit for about 50 pence. And sandwiches with a bag of crisps, 50 pence. You won't believe.
And now the main event. That's right, this is an all-afternoon talk on Saturday the 17th, organised by Truth Seekers North East. The same venue as the warm-up talk, Friday night, you just heard. And I was just one of 3 acts on the bill. I did my talk on the BBC in the middle, but before me was Richard Wright. Richard Wright's the chap in the middle you see there. He was doing his talk on out-of-place artefacts. And that was very, very interesting indeed. Not filmed, unfortunately. Then it was me, and finally it was Mark Cocking, the chap on the left there. Now, he's been on Hapanwo Radio, if you listen regularly. Richard, of course, has been a guest on Hapanwo Radio many, many times. And also, he featured in the last Truth Seekers North East videos, one of them, because I did a whole series of them. So check him out there. It was a really, really good afternoon, absolutely fantastic. A lot of people turned up, about the same amount as turned up the evening before. A lot of the same people too. We had great fun. There was as you'll hear, there was some interjection from the floor, which I accepted, and it went very well. There were some very interesting additions. So I hope you enjoy this. And as I said, there is a longer version of this talk on my channel. It's called the BBC and Mind Control. No need to put a link in the description box to that. Unfortunately, I didn't time this talk very well either, just like I did last time. I had to knock an hour off it from the New Horizons St Anne's ones, and I thought I'd managed it, but I hadn't, so sorry about that, but I still think I did a good job and the audience loved it, so I hope you do too. Now, the book you see me holding there in my hands, there's a little bit of a story behind that, and I'll be telling it you later. But you can see the smile on my face, how delighted I was to hold that in my hands. It was really, really good. And this is us down at the pub afterwards. As you can see, we needed to unwind with a pint once the day was over with. Absolutely fantastic. Fantastic day, fantastic weekend. I loved every minute of it, and so did Richard, and so did Mark. You see how happy we are there.
Everybody been fed in water, yeah, you can sit there, you've got it on. Okay, are we all here in attendance?
No, we've got 2 coming through the door. The newcomers, get in.
Okay, here we go for the second session, people. I'd like to introduce once more Mr. Ben Emlyn-Jones, and he's going to be talking about the BBC and exactly where your license fee and money goes. Okay, so without further ado, Truth Seekers Northeast welcomes Mr. Ben Emlyn-Jones. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks for having me back a second time, because those of you, I think, were here last night. I recognise many faces who were here yesterday evening when I talked about UFOs. The UFOs might come up in this talk, but only as an aside, because today I'm going to be talking about the BBC and where your licence fee, should you pay one, really goes. Now, I want to first say thank you very much. You've not only come here to see me do this talk, and I appreciate you doing that, and paying good money at the door to come in, excuse me, but also the very fact you have come here means that I am upstaging the mainstream media, if only for this group of you who are here. So you could be vegetating in front of the Emmerdale omnibus and all these other pieces of mine sewage that the mainstream media is, but instead you choose to come here and listen to me, and so I'm really, really grateful. It's a big two fingers up at the BBC. I'm really, really pleased that you've done this. So that's the gesture you are actually performing anyway as well. And first things first, Richard, that's yours.
Oh,
there you go.
make sure it doesn't ring.
No worries, mate. Richard was on beforehand. He did a good talk, very interesting. But for those of you who are not familiar with me, I know a lot of you are, my name is Ben Emlyn-Jones, and this is my website. Hospital Porters Against the New World Order. Pronounced Panwo for short. There's a long story behind this, but I've been doing this now for 12 years. The website dates back a long time. There's an awful lot that I built over the years. It started out as a single blog about 12 years ago. So I've been just working on it since then and doing live shows like these. And eventually I come here to stand before you today. That's where it all culminates in. I've also written several books which are on the UFO theme, which you can purchase from that table there. Let me know if you want a copy or 2 copies. They're £10 each or £15 for 2, because they both related to each other. Now, this was me, the portering Buddha. I was a hospital porter for 23 years. Then I lost my job. I got kicked out of the NHS, and guess what? It was a conspiracy. I've talked about that in more detail on other lectures.
Can I interrupt and say, can you stand on that side, please, because people can't see?
Which side?
Would you stand on that side? Any problem?
Over here?
Other side of the table. Other side of the table.
Over here?
Yeah.
Oh, right, yeah, sure. Just one moment.
Laptop. Sorry.
No worries.
It's silver theatre again.
I may be wrong.
Well, your camera moved down.
The what there?
If you stand here.
All right, I'll just
changing everything
reframe.
around for you.
Just camera moved.
Yeah, I think that'll be all right. Yeah. Okay. Who can't see me? Who can't see me? Is it very important you see me?
Just the screen.
It's just the screen.
Oh, I see. Right. It's not because you can't see me. All right.
If you stand over to the your right a bit.
Like that. Okay. Yeah. No problem. How's that? How's that?
Lift the laptop forward.
Right.
Silhouette theatre.
And put the laptop on the billiard table.
That's all right. That's okay. Yeah, that's so I can see the time. Right, you are. Right. How long have I got? I've got an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Right, an hour and a half. No worries. I was a hospital porter and I lost my job. It was a conspiracy. That's a long story, but a large number of people who have these kinds of interests and speak out on these kinds of subjects often end up being hit professionally. Other examples: Miles Johnson, Gary Heseltine, Kevin Annett. There's a whole list of us now. So this is some kind of policy, I believe. But I'm going to talk about the BBC. This is the centre of what I'm going to discuss this particular lecture, although I will be going off on a tangent because I believe the issues associated with the BBC actually cover an awful lot more. I think the BBC is, a very, very important part of a system which seems to be designed to change society in a certain way, as it is directed by a small elite, the political classes of the country and the world. The BBC itself is started off back a long time ago. It has a long history. It's a major international media corporation. Even though the first B stands for British, it is a worldwide organisation that operates in every single country on Earth, bar none. There's actually an organisation called BBC Worldwide, which is kind of an umbrella group, which is actually one of the governing bodies of this BBC. It operates regularly, it broadcasts regularly in 26 languages, and not regularly in many, many more. Has correspondents in every single state, and is basically it's similar to CNN, it's similar to CBS, ABC, although it's much older and it's much more widespread. It's one of the principal world organisations in terms of the media. Its motto is to educate, to inform and entertain. That's its motto. In my view, it does none of those things. Some of you may believe that it does the last. I mean, there's a couple of decent things worth watching, but only a tiny minority of the programmes are actually worth switching on for. I believe it is a psychological warfare operation intended to change the way we think and the way we feel, so that we become different kinds of people, the kind of people that are wanted in a new type of society, the society which is being planned by an elite group. And it's bad news for us, basically. The type of society that they're envisaging would be one of much, much greater internationalism and authoritarianism, where there's far less individual freedom. There'll be an enormous amount of suffering on the part of the individual people if this is allowed to go ahead. The BBC's history goes back into the mists of time, right up to the actual beginning of the first experimental radio transmissions from the Marconi plant in Manchester. It actually all started here in Britain, so we're dating back to around about 1920. And the BBC, the British Broadcasting Company, was set up by a guy called John Reith, or as he soon became known, Sir John Reith. He was as likely to get a knighthood as I am not to get one. I mean, he was inevitable he'd be knighted. So it started off as a private institution which was run by him and a guy called John Logie Baird, who's actually a Scottish man who is credited for inventing the television set. Interestingly, he was also interested in the occult and psychical research, but that's another story. In 1923, the BBC was given a royal charter, and it became the British Broadcasting Corporation, which is what it's called today. It is state-owned, it's not privately owned. It is run by the state and funded by the state, and it has an annual budget today of around about £6 billion, £4 billion of which is provided by the TV licence fee, although that's going to have to change pretty soon, as I'll explain later. The BBC began with radio broadcasts at the time, straight after a time when you could actually buy radio transmitters anywhere in any shop, and it was almost like the primitive version of the internet, where you could actually set up your own radio station if you wanted to. Although very quickly this was licensed, and once the licensing system began for airwaves, the phenomenon of pirate radio began. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Miles Johnston, but he was involved in the Irish pirate radio scene, which is probably how he ended up what he is today. Basically, so there was a system where the government, through the General Post Office at the time, organised the broadcasting of the media. So all electronic media was controlled by the state from the day one, whether it was independent or whether it was part of the BBC. The BBC entered soon after the charter. It went and started broadcasting from its first permanent national headquarters in Savoy Place, London, and it provided radio commentary on various formats that are quite familiar today. Actually, there was news reports during the 1920-26 general strike. The BBC scabbed. They continued operating when all the newspapers were shut down by the strikers. So you had the news reports, the kind of news you have today, is pretty much that format was worked out from the very beginning. Also, live broadcasts. The 1927 Derby had a live radio broadcast from the scene with a commentator speaking and telling you what's happening. And this led to other sporting events. In fact, in the same year, the first ever rugby match was covered by the BBC live on the air by a radio commentator. It was actually England versus Wales, and I believe Wales won that one. The following year, the first football match was
also commentated upon on the radio by the BBC. It was Arsenal, and I can't remember who they were playing. I think Arsenal won, but that was the first ever live football match in, I think, 1927. In 1932, I believe, that the world's first, it was the world's, not just Britain's, the world's first commercial television broadcast began. And it began from Alexandra Palace, which was actually the BBC's television broadcast centre, national television broadcast centre, right through till 1960. And the very, very first TV programme was a half-hour radio play directed and produced by John Lodi Baird, the inventor of the television. And at that time, very, very few people had television sets. They were very expensive, and only the rich could afford them, and they were like big things about the size of a refrigerator with a tiny, small vertical screen, very primitive by today's standards. But back then, they were considered the latest thing, and people were in awe of them. And people who could afford it would have a special television room in their house, and some public libraries actually had television rooms where people could come and watch. But very, very few people had a home set. The radio remained the cornerstone of the commercial home entertainment, electronic media, right through probably still the post-war period. Most people didn't have TV until after, en masse, that is, the working class people, until after World War II, when the prices came down on the sets. Now, the idea of funding a publicly organised broadcasting service dated right back to the Royal Charter, when the actual, what was not a TV licence, the equivalent of a TV licence now, in other words, you didn't have to pay a regular fee, but all radio sets, when they were sold, had a special value-added tax system, which was basically, I think it was 12 shillings. I don't know how much that was in 1923 compared to modern-day money, but that was basically used to fund the BBC. That money went to the BBC, and it was just a one-off payment. You bought your radio set, you paid the tax on top of it, and that was it. Everyone left you alone. That was your radio set, and you could keep it, and you could do whatever you like with it after that. The actual TV licence fee itself, which I'll talk about later, came in 1946, when post-World War II TV broadcast began. So the John Reith, John Logie Baird, all these other people, they continued to developing the TV and radio services at the BBC. And the TV was off throughout World War II, and it was just radio only, but then TV came back and it expanded even more to what it is now. Now, even as long ago, even before the BBC began, the idea that the media could be used as a way to control people's minds was well established. In fact, it dates back to the beginning of newspapers and the idea of propaganda, which is perfectly well known, even in the old days. And of course, television and radio brought a new opportunity, a new way for the theorists behind propaganda, or public relations, as it was called euphemistically, to actually expand. And I'll be saying more about that in a minute, because I believe that the BBC, when I say the BBC is a mind control operation, I am concerned by the content of some of the broadcasts, which leads me to that conclusion. Now, in 1932, the BBC moved into its first purpose-built, that is built from the ground up, TV studio. This is one of the first radio studios and radio headquarters. This was the headquarters for the entire BBC at the time, both radio and TV, although, as I said, TV was broadcast from Alexandra Palace. But this actually was, this is Broadcasting House, and I believe it's the first of its type in the world. It sits in London on the junction between Langham Place and Portland Street, and this is a photograph I took myself because I went to visit it. This building was constructed and the radio was broadcast there right through until 2013, when the TV was also moved there as well. So this now is the headquarters for both BBC Radio and the BBC TV. As you can see, it's a strangely shaped building. It has this rotunda-shaped feel to it. It's slightly conical, it's tapering, and it has some steps on it. It resembles maybe one of the ancient, it has a slightly Middle Eastern feel. It's maybe one of the old ziggurats or other type buildings like that. And it's made of Portland stone, and it is Art Deco in style, which is quite a common form of architecture in those days.
But that is actually Broadcasting House. I went there, I took this photo of it, I went and had a look at the place. There is the plaque beside the door, still there, the British Broadcasting Corporation. It's outside the front door of Broadcasting House. You can actually go on a tour there, which I haven't done yet, but I am planning on doing so. And when I do, I will let you know exactly what it's like. But this particular expedition, I just wanted to go around the outside and see what it was like from the outside.
We're shuffling on for some seats there.
Now, hello. Yeah, thank you for coming. Go ahead. I'm still visible on my camera, yeah. Now this, to me, Broadcasting House reminds me of this image. This is Bruegel's Tower of Babel, a famous painting of the famous Tower of Babel, a story from the Bible. Now the story of Bruegel's Tower of Babel is interesting because it is about a famous king called Nimrod who wanted to build a tower so tall that it reached heaven. And there was a long complicated situation with God, and God was not amused, and he changed people's he changed the way people think and feel in terms of language. What he did was he made people speak lots and lots of different languages, and today we call an unintelligible foreign language a Babel, and it comes from this, the Tower of Babel, and he created many, many nations. I can't remember the exact quote from the Bible, but it's a very interesting story. And the idea of turning nations, creating nations and turning nations into one is very, very interesting because the BBC is very much involved, I think, in the internationalist, globalist project. There's another building that's made which is specifically designed to look like the Tower of Babel, and that's this one. This is the European Parliament. It's specifically modelled on Bruegel's Tower of Babel. Very interesting indeed. And the BBC, as you'll know if you follow the coverage of the Brexit debate, is extremely pro-Remain, and it was really, really trying very hard to assist the government in getting a Remain vote in 2016 so that Britain stayed as a part of the European Union. And this here is George Orwell, one of the most brilliant and I think important figures in 20th century thought, who is still very, very much relevant today. George Orwell worked at the BBC. He worked in Broadcasting House, and he wrote, of course, famous books, including his masterpiece, his final great masterpiece, 1984, which talked about the idea of superstates coming together to create a world order, a new world order. He talked about the way language could be used to manipulate people's thoughts and feelings. He understood, at a very, very fundamental level, the battlefield of the modern age is the human mind. It's the keep of the fortress. From the conquest of the human mind comes all other conquests. If they can't make us think and feel a certain way, there's nothing they can do to make us behave a certain way, and there's nothing they can do to actually subdue us, because the people who are not part of the elite are too many in number, and the actual elite, the people behind the globalist agenda, are too few. And so George Orwell understood this. George Orwell was a member of an organisation called the Fabian Society, and I'll say more about that in a minute, because he, I think, tried to expose what was going on in that organisation in the best way he could. Now, George Orwell had an office at Broadcasting House, and all the rooms in Broadcasting House are numbered. Can you guess the number of George Orwell's office? 101. Room 101. Yeah, incredible, isn't it? Now this is the Church of All Souls in Langham Place. It's just outside the entrance to Broadcasting House. Now, this was built in 1823. It's a lot older than Broadcasting House by over a century. And it was designed by a guy called William Moore. Now when I first saw this, when I first arrived there, I thought it was a Knights Templar church, because it looks very, very much like the famous Knights Templar church off Fleet Street, which was featured in the Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown. But it's actually not. It's far too new. It's far too new for that. It's far too modern. It's much too recent by far. The Knights Templar were a secret society that operated in the Middle Ages. But the fact that the architect has actually incorporated this rotunda-like structure into the building at the entrance, it does indicate to me that he's been influenced by the style of the Knights Templar. Very, very interesting building indeed. Very unusual kind of church. And of course we see something similar in Broadcasting House. We see the circular rotunda type theme to the design of the building. Now this here is the entrance to the BBC as you go. What happens is you go into Broadcasting House, but you don't go into the actual old building, you go to the right of that, up Langham Place, and there's what they call the plaza. And I'll be describing that in more detail later, but as you approach the entrance, you see this in front of you. It's really designed to shock and awe the natives, isn't it? The Romans used to do this. They used to build the most magnificent buildings and structures wherever they went, basically just to show everyone how wonderful they were, how intelligent and creative they were. And it just seems like the BBC are doing the same to us. You have this big logo here, which cost £80,000 to design. That logo. It's correct. That's the new BBC logo. Now, do you remember the old BBC logo? It was sort of like, it was similar to that. It was some kind of italicized and had some coloured stripes above it and below it, and they gave a team of graphic designers £80,000 to create that. You can just imagine what happened, can't you? They took the money, they spent the money, and the day before they had to deliver, they thought, we haven't done any work yet, what are we going to do? They said, just straighten it up, just straighten up the letters. It's probably something as simple as that. But there you go for the entrance, and there's you have the actual bowels of mind control centre inside there, which of course there's security guards everywhere, so not everyone can get in there, even though the plaza is designed to be open. And that, if you take a step back, that's what you see. You can see there's this big concave facade on the right hand side of the old Broadcasting House's convex facade. It's almost like a sexual pair, a male and female kind of double, like the spire and the dome, which I've talked about on in other talks. Very, very interesting indeed. Now that is the actual plaza. So you go back further, and this is what you see. And this plaza is a public area, and it's intended to make the BBC more accessible to the public, so that, in a sense, it's a kind of merging of the interior of the BBC and the general public as well. Now, if you look on the left there, you'll see the entrance to a cafe. Now, that is the original cafe Broadcasting House, which has been adapted now into a public cafe. It used to be just staff only. Now it's staff and public. So again, this is this idea that the BBC staff and ordinary people can go in there and they can drink coffee together. You can go in there, order your drinks, reach past Hugh Edwards for the little packets of sugar and things like that. Although I went in there, I didn't see the man. Things like that. But there's something a bit sinister about that cafe, which I'll come to later, about the entire structure you see in front of you. Now this is the old television centre. Now this was opened in 1960, and all BBC national television was broadcast from this structure. This is in White City in London, just quite a long way from the new Broadcasting House. It's in West London. And it closed in 2013 when all TV services moved up to Broadcasting House to its current location. But again, do you see the similarity in architecture? You see that rotunda-like structure in the middle, and then you see there's another cylindrical structure above it. It's almost like it is a variation on a single theme. A slightly small picture there, but that's actually to the right of the plaza. That is the John Peel wing. Now, John Peel was actually a radio DJ for many, many years, and he's one of the people accused of being involved in the child abuse scandal. Now, I should point out that he's never been convicted. I don't know whether he's guilty or not, and I don't jump to conclusions like that. He's not decisive as with Jimmy Savile. However, there's been no one's ever thought about changing the name of this. Now, do you see there's like a inverted, you probably can't see it here, but on the top of the John Peel wing there's actually an inverted glass, transparent conical structure, like an ice cream cone or a trumpet. It's actually this. That's it close up. Now that is a memorial to all news reporters who are killed in the line of duty. And being a location news reporter is actually quite a dangerous job. In the Iraq War, for example, the death rate among journalists was higher than that of the combatants. And at 10 PM, whenever the news is read out, that lights up, and there's some words on there, and I can't remember what the words said. Sorry about that. Now this is the floor of the atrium. This paved area to the right of as you go in from Langham Place, to the right of the old Broadcasting House. Now there's something very strange here. There are words written on some of the paving stones. And if you read them, there's a strange kind of pattern to them. They're in little sets. Now one set is a group of islands, so you have St Helena, the Isle of Wight, Southern Fuel, etc., etc., etc. But then you get prisons. You have Alcatraz, Wormwood Scrubs, Sing Sing, etc., etc., all these famous prisons laid out. And then you have My Lai, Auschwitz, Sharpeville, and several others. Now these are famous massacres where large numbers of people were killed. And I do wonder why they've done that. I don't understand exactly why they've done that at all. You also see long lines of metal embedded into the surface, which I think is symbolic of something that's in the titles of the news reports, which I'll come on to in a minute. I always thought it was a bit weird, and what's more, there's these little gratings every so often. You can actually hear BBC radio coming through the ground, covered up through the ground. And if you hang around there long enough, you might see a location news reporter or an outdoor broadcast. There'll be a reporter in front of a camera, and you can stand behind there and you can go like that. Which I'll do if I'm over there when that happens. And this is the titles of the current BBC News. These titles have been used since 2013, and they're quite emotive actually. There's a countdown from 30 seconds to 0, and you see lots of an array of images of brave news reporters in difficult situations, standing in front of cameras and giving out the news and speaking and transmitting information. And you see these lines, these coloured lines, running through the sky around the world and converging on BBC Television Centre and Broadcasting House. It's like these represent flows of information coming from far distant lands where there's all war and there's famine and other things going on, coming through the sky, rushing through the sky towards the BBC TV newsroom so that it can be broadcast to the world so everyone can hear it. Pretentious bastards. This really is so. And now we come to some of the darker sides of Broadcasting House. I mentioned before there's a curious obsession with massacres and prisons and things like that. And I do wonder why. I couldn't find any explanation on the BBC website for the words on the bottom on the ground. However, I did find an explanation on the BBC's website, plus a sort of half-hearted non-apology for this. Now this is a bas-relief carving, sculpture, which was put up on the wall when Broadcasting House was built in the early 1930s. It was opened in 1932. And it is by a sculptor called Eric Gill. He was a major figure in the art world back then. He's created a lot of artworks, like there's this famous seahorse structure that he's built on the walls of a hotel in Brighton, for example. And he was commissioned to produce 3 images for Broadcasting House when the work began on it in I think about 1929, they started building it. And what you see here is actually a scene from Shakespeare's play, Midsummer Night's Dream. The individual in the middle is called Puck, it's one of the characters, and what you see dancing around him are 2 of the young maidens in the actual scene, where there's Puck blowing on his horns. Now these 2 young girls on either side, you may know this, are dancing, and they're lifting their skirts up. And I wonder why the lifting of the skirts was incorporated into this particular image on the BBC. And I think with hindsight, what we know about the BBC and its structure and what happens to young children within its walls should make us wonder why that image was chosen and why indeed that image is still there. There's been no one suggested removing these Gill images from the BBC building. No one has ever suggested it. There's been a kind of half-hearted, like I said, non-apology plus a sort of explanation about why they're there and why they're still there. But to me, it's an evasion. This is the most famous of the 3 Gill images on the facade Broadcasting House. This is above the main entrance where you saw that bronze plaque at the British Broadcasting Corporation. This is a very, very important image. This is another scene from Shakespeare. This is from The Tempest, and that's Prospero and Ariel, 2 characters from that particular play. The Tempest is very interesting because it's another of these fantasy type of plays that Shakespeare did. And the character Ariel is portrayed here as a young boy or girl, you can't actually tell. But the statue has visible genitals, which is very, very unusual because in terms of classical art, you may be familiar with Greco-Roman sculptures, which is pretty much what most government buildings have on them. They tend to be quite androgynous and sexless. For example, the men have very, very small penises, and the women have nothing at all. They're like blank, they're like Barbie, just a blank space.
So it was quite risque, I suppose, to have a nude with actual visible genitalia, especially if it was a woman or girl. Now, I should point out that Ariel is actually an indeterminate gender. Shakespeare actually used the male pronoun he to describe this character, which is actually a non-human creature. It's actually some kind of fairy or spirit in the actual play. But there's many later versions of the play where they use the pronoun she. And in fact, by the time this was carved, it was normal for Ariel to be considered a girl. So that's another reason I think we should be very concerned that this image was put on the BBC building in the first place and remains there. This is the third gill image. This is also from The Tempest, and this is the only of the three gill images I could find on there. In fact, the only image anywhere really I could see at that facility where there's no overt sexual connotation relating to young people, people who are underage. This is that's Ariel in the middle there, and there's these two looks like winged humanoids on either side. I'm not familiar with the play. I only looked at it briefly, but that's another scene there. You always think to yourself, well, it's the BBC, you know, they present this high art. It's like a theatre, you know. Shakespeare, the greatest English writer ever. You know, that's what it's about. No, but it can't be, because there's something odd about these. And when you look at the background of the actual sculpture, that's him. That's a self-portrait of Eric Gill. Eric Gill died in 1940. In 1980, a biography was published of him, which alleged that he was a child abuser. He sexually abused his daughters, and indeed the family dog. It alleged this. He's quite a degenerate man, according to this particular biography. Now, the Eric Gill Society, which is basically his fan club, they were quite incensed by this, and they were very angry, and they tried to, they contacted the author of the book and said, you know, where did you get this information from? How dare you? And Gill's both daughters, who were both alive back then, came forward and they said it's true. Both of them said it was true. And this, Gill was never criminally prosecuted, but I think we should be concerned the fact that both his daughters said it was true, 40 years after the man died. That should provide cause for concern, the fact that he was commissioned to produce these images at the very time when he was committing abuse, and that the images are still there, and what we know about the BBC's history, because no one's ever suggested removing these images, or, as I say, BBC are very apologistic and very soapy towards Gill. Despite this, despite what we know now, how long has it been going on for? Considering that the BBC were working with a paedophile from day one, and now we know, suddenly, they've admitted that there was a serial sex offender, one of their biggest stars working within their midst, Jimmy Savile. When the story of Jimmy Savile broke, several people wrote to the BBC and reminded them that accusations against Jimmy Savile actually date back a long way, long before it was actually first mentioned. In fact, David Icke talks about it in the late 1990s. But they laughed at him, didn't they? They called him a madman. Now they admitted he was right. No one's thanked him or apologised for him. They're just patting on their back. They're patting themselves on the back how clever they were to uncover him. The official line from the BBC is that no one knows exactly how many children he abused, because his career at the BBC was very long. 46 years he worked at the BBC, and for what we can tell, he was doing his dirty deeds from day one. Especially when he's presenting various music programmes, Top of the Pops, which of course, if you watch Top of the Pops, you see there's lots of young people dancing in the studio. They have like a big dance floor in the studio, don't they? Not only that, but he was abusing patients at the hospitals because he was in the NHS, and he worked as a porter in a hospital, and that fills me with shame. I find that difficult to deal with, I must admit. And he's a disgrace to our profession. But the line from both the NHS and the BBC just makes no sense. It's kind of, oh my God, we had no idea. What a terrible oversight on our part. Do you believe that? There's no way this could have happened unless this man was operating with a massive institution of collaboration. There's several people who have effectively admitted that. Esther Ranson, the founder of Childline, the protector of children, she said after all this came out,
Yeah, well, we all heard about it. We didn't sort of like do anything. We sort of thought it was a bit silly, but we sort of knew. It was an open secret, whatever the hell that means. Sounds like a oxymoron, open secret. Janet Street Porter, another person who seems to have known about it. These people have not been arrested or questioned by the police. There's been no real investigation. In any other institution, less powerful institution, the whole place would be shut down and the police would take it apart from top to bottom, from the Director General to the Studio T-boy. But instead, it just carries on. No one said anything. And now, do you believe it's finished now, just because this guy's gone? No. I bet he's just the tip of the iceberg.
Ben, did you come across Johnny Rotten?
Yes, oh yes, that's a good point. Thanks, Mark. John Lydon and Johnny Rotten of the Sex Pistols. There's an outtake from the Old Grey Whistle test from 1978, where the guy is saying, well, I can tell you a few things about Jimmy Savile. He's not what you think he is. And Lydon was actually challenged about this in the last few years after it all came out about Savile, and the man was crying. He was crying with guilt and shame. But he never said anything at the time. No one did. Well, I think there's something about human psychology here, maybe, yeah, it's like the Milgram experiment is a good one. I can't go into details now, I don't have time, but it's basically testing human compliance and obedience, and the fact that people will go along with things. They'll never consider it their responsibility to say anything about it. They'll just say, I'm obeying orders. I'm absolved from all blame because I'm being told what to do by somebody else within this institution. It's a form of groupthink. Thanks, Mark. As you walk up Portland Street, you come out of the plaza and go around Broadcasting House to the west side, walk up Portland Street, this is what you see. This is just a continuation, really, of Broadcasting House. It's built in recently, it's opened in 2013. It's designed to look like the original Broadcasting House structure. It's a different material, but it's the same kind of grey colour as the original Portland stone. You turn right into Duchess Street, and then you come to a place, something called Hallam Place, which links up to Langham Place, so you can walk right around the entire building. Now there's a row of windows on Hallam Place, which you look into them, and that's what you see. Now I've tried to take a photograph, which is not very easy to do, because there's a lot of reflection, as you can tell. But there's an office there, behind these two windows, which are made of very, very strong plate glass. There's a 3-foot gap between the two windows. It's built for security, really extreme security. There's a 3-foot gap between these two windows, and then there's an office there you can see. Now, do you see a row of lights, square lights in the distance? That's actually the BBC newsroom. You can actually photograph the BBC newsroom from the public street. Although it's a long way away, it's from the other side of that office through another set of windows. But you can't, and it's also slightly below ground level, it's in the basement. But that's actually the BBC newsroom where they broadcast the news from. And it's quite something. I must go on a tour, actually. That's the next thing I'll do. I'll let you know how I get on with that. And who pays for all this? Because that new Broadcasting House, the refurbishment for the 2013 opening, cost £2 billion. You could build a teaching hospital for that. Well, as I said, the BBC's budget is £6 billion a year, and 2/3 of that is funded by the licence fee. The TV licence, as I said, this is a state-owned institution funded by the government, owned and funded by the government under Royal Charter. Now the TV licence is, again, this is something quite unusual. I think there's not many other countries that have this system. I think Namibia is one of them in southern Africa, and I don't know of any others right now. But basically, everyone who owns a television, not just when you buy it like in the old days with the radio sets, like I was talking about earlier, but just when you buy a TV and own a television set, you're required to pay a fee towards the state for the ownership of that television. A licence. You have to pay a licence. And woe betide anyone who doesn't pay it, because just have a look at this. I don't know how many of you remember, this is quite old, but it's very funny. Well, hope you can hear it all right.
I see it.
Listening to
Hilarious. Do you remember that?
I've never seen it.
Oh, it's from a few years back. That's one of the warning adverts they used to have on the TV about licence fees. There haven't been that many successful prosecutions actually for TV licence evasion, especially as it has risen enormously in the last few years. And in fact, it's actually been decriminalised now, primarily because magistrates' courts got fed up with the fact that 10% of everything they were doing was about the TV licence evasion, and they had a backlog of cases, I think, going 140 years into the future. So it's been decriminalised. You can still get a fine, but it's a civil offence, not a criminal offence. Hi, Maureen.
It's over 2 million people in the UK do not have a licence.
Well, how long is it going to take to get 2 million people through court? Probably till the earth freezes over. So ignore any of this scaremongering. These are threats which are completely empty. Threatening is all they can do. I mean, you may have seen some of the YouTube videos where you see someone knocking on the door and it's the TV licence guy, and he opens up and says, "Could I see a TV licence, please?" And the man will say several, or the person inside will say several things, such as they might say, "Oh, am I under citizen's arrest? Have the police been called?" And they'll say, "No." "Right, goodbye." Or you can say something like, "I don't really want to give money to an organisation which creates paedophiles and rapists," and things like that, and controls my mind. There's all kinds of answers you can give these people, and they'll say, "Well, we're going to have to escalate your case down." So go ahead. So don't worry about it. Oh yeah.
When you originally paid for your licence, were you not paying for the analog signal? You originally, when you first got your TV licence, you were only paying that because of you were receiving the analog signal through your set. My dad used to work for 20s TV, and he said years and years ago that's what happened. And now that we're all digital, we shouldn't be paying a TV licence.
Yeah, the switch over from analog to digital is an interesting case. Not least the fact that your TV set is not really your own anymore, because it can't even operate without a decoding, without having a decoder from the station, where previously you could just, basically your TV could just pick up whatever you wanted. You could just tune it yourself if you want. But now you can't do that anymore. And I don't think that's ever been addressed. You're absolutely right.
It actually has. BT, I used to work for BT, and about 10 years ago they brought it up.
Oh, right.
And that they were told to keep quiet.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I see. That's very interesting. Thank you very much. Thanks for the information. So there's several people, like Daniel Bostock, for example, who's a friend of mine. He's got some great videos about TV licence turning up. Hi.
Just before you leave that screen, the tick in the TV licensing, I thought it was David Icke or somebody else mentioned that that's actually a part of Saturn's rings. Saturn, Saturnian, Satan. So if you look at the nightly tick is a perfect example. It's not a tick, it's actually part of Saturn's ring.
It's a glint of the ring of Saturn.
Yeah.
Oh, right, that's interesting.
So that's Satan on their screen.
So there's something that's like astrological and occult about this.
Yeah.
Wouldn't surprise me, because I mean, we've seen like what I think are maybe sexual ritual images in the BBC's headquarters, so perhaps this is something similar. Now, the BBC does cover the same subjects that we are interested in: UFOs, the paranormal, conspiracy theories, spiritual matters. They do cover these, and they do it in a very different tone to how we do. And it's got worse. Now, if you go back to, say, the 1970s or so, there are a couple of good UFO programs and paranormal shows. And you can actually get them on YouTube, most of them, and they are reasonably factual. They don't go as far as they should, but they're still reasonably good as productions. The modern coverage of these particular subjects is dire. It couldn't possibly be worse. I mean, there is a limit to how bad a TV program can be by accident. This is the educate, inform, and entertain becomes disinform, demoralise and mislead. And it's very, very obvious that this is going on. Now, this is one of the actual... I'll say some more about the conspiratorial programmes in a minute, but I want to say a bit about this guy who I've got an enormous hate on for, as you'll know if you follow my work. This is Professor Brian Cox. Yeah. He is one of the most detestable individuals in the mainstream media, in my view. Oh, yeah. Sorry? Really? That's interesting.
That's the first time. My daughter's a scientist, a real scientist, and he is ridiculed in the scientific community for being just...
I can just imagine what the scientific community think of this poser, because he was a nobody until 2005. Well, he was working.
He was a singer.
Oh yes, of course. He sang for the band Doreen. He played keyboard with this band called Doreen.
He tried to play.
Yeah, he tried. He was going, yeah.
He coincidentally took over from the great scientist from Durham who released a DVD about global warming.
Oh really? That's interesting. Because the D-Ream song was used by Tony Blair for his election campaign. Things can only get better. But so this man in particular was nobody until 2005, when BBC Horizon made a programme about Einstein, because it was the centenary of the creation of Einstein's special theory of relativity. And this chap was, Cox was doing something, probably sweeping the floors or something, at the CERN, the European Nuclear Research Centre, and the Large Hadron Collider. And he was interviewed for this programme, and wow, opportunity knocks, and a star was born. He was transformed overnight into a household name. And I can just imagine what the proper scientists think of this guy, thinking, why him? Because he smiles, and he's handsome, and I suppose, well, if you like that sort of thing, if you like girly men, and he's got all the right ingredients for the perfect mainstream media whore, and that's what he is. Now he presented a TV show called Science Britannica, which, to be honest, the first 2 episodes were quite good. It was a history of science show, really, and it was interesting. He talks about Newton and Faraday and Curie and these other pioneers. The 3rd episode was a piece of propaganda about how good vaccines are, and several other things, several other contentious scientific precepts, for which he presented a completely establishment case. And he did it. I don't think this man has the intelligence to realise how he's being used. They just stroke his ego till his hair stands out like a cat. And they just, that's basically what he's so, people like him are useful idiots. They're just so thick, they don't realise, they just get pampered to the point where they'll just do anything you want. His ego, his huge, fragile ego makes him very, very vulnerable to being turned into this kind of controlled opposition. And, well, not even opposition, control. There's a really, really funny case, actually. I mean, do you ever watch Stargazing Live? It's really, really funny, because this guy's not an astronomer, so I don't know what he's doing presenting an astronomy programme. His co-host is an astronomer, Dara O'Brien, and they used to do a live stargazing every evening from the Jodrell Bank Radio Telescope in Cheshire, which is one of the most sensitive and powerful astronomical instruments in the world. And the news came in of a discovery of a new planet called Threppleton Holmes B. And Brian Cox, he was like jumping up and down for joy. Well, let's turn the antenna towards Threppleton Holmes B. He was going, let's do that. Let's go and have a listen, see if we can pick up any signals from it. There might be aliens there. He was, and of course, they started to turn the antenna towards Threppleton Holmes B. And suddenly the broadcast terminated, and it was all cut off. And the BBC suddenly stopped the Wright broadcast. You can just imagine Cox going, what's the matter? Why have you stopped the broadcast? What's going on? Well, the truth of the matter was the BBC did issue a statement saying they chose, it was a live broadcast, it was a live show. They chose not to proceed with the programme because they were concerned any transmissions from Threppleton Holmes B might breach the corporation's editorial guidelines.
Swear.
They thought the aliens might swear on live TV. Which is crazy. Threppleton Holmes B is 600 light years away. It's not orbiting the sun. It's an exoplanet. It orbits another star.
Have they applied for TV license?
Oh, maybe. But it's just, this is, again, it's possible that this is part of the UFO cover-up, which the BBC have been involved in. Now this collection of characters is, well, there's a group of people there, the one standing at the back, and the guy at the front is called Andrew Maxwell. This is a BBC conspiracy road trip, 9/11. This was you've seen it, Mark, haven't you? It's hard to find this online now, actually.
I have friends on it, 2 of them. Yeah.
Oh, God, you can get hold of this, but this was abysmal. It was absolutely terrible. They basically, this guy Andrew Maxwell at the front, the comedian, he's an Irish guy. He took these 5 people standing at the back on a tour. It was a road trip. These people all believe in conspiracy theories to do with 9/11. And his intention was to change their minds with rationality, science, and a good lashing of moral blackmail. And it was really, I mean, I could talk for half an hour. I don't have time to tell you the details. But basically, it was a piece of total and utter disinformation. It was lies. It was designed to distract and to confuse people. So if you're watching this and you have suspicions about 9/11, you'll lose them.
That is Charlie Veitch.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, exactly, one of these people did change their minds very famously. This guy, tall guy standing at the back, is Charlie Veitch. Now, he used to be a big name in the truth movement. In fact, Mark and I think we both met him because he was involved with CMR.
He was at my house for a week, just a few weeks before this. We sat every night talking about what he'd do, and he didn't do anything.
No, it is bloody awful. This guy was involved with critical mass radio. He went to a couple of meetings in Manchester with truth seekers, with Truth Juice Manchester and people like that. So we sort of knew this guy a bit. He changed his mind, and he decided that the official story was true. The other four didn't, to their credit. Now, one of these other four people, I won't say which one of them actually wrote to me when they had read my review of this programme. I gave it an absolute bashing on my blog. One of them wrote to me and told me that their own contribution to the programme was completely and utterly edited to make them look like they were saying things they never said. And this was, they very, very deeply regret being involved in it. They wish they'd never done it. Which is why, when the follow-up series came along, I decided not to take part. And I told them so in no uncertain terms, because they asked me to be in the follow-up series. This is here, Charlie Veitch there. He is examining this very sophisticated engineering schematic, which I think proves that two aircraft crashing into a steel building can turn it into a cloud of dust. And this is the big reveal. Charlie coming clean. I'm a reformed character. I don't believe the conspiracy theories anymore. And when he reformed, he reformed very, very radically. He became very anti-conspiracy theory overnight. And here's the big reveal. This is where he's confessing to Andrew Maxwell wearing his ridiculous sunglasses there, in front of the White House of all places. Incredible. There was a three-series follow-up afterwards, a three-program follow-up, which is what they asked me to be involved in, and I refused. This is the 7/7 equivalent with Andrew Maxwell there. Now, do you recognise Tony Topping there on the far right? Tony he's I know, has spoken here, Tony. And Tony's a good friend of mine. I like the guy very much. Tony is again chose to take part in this programme against my advice, and I've never let him forget it, because he, like nearly everyone who's been involved in this series, deeply regrets getting involved. They wish they'd never done it. They were made to look awful. You can edit anyone to make, if you're going to film people for 2 weeks, it takes 2 weeks to make these programmes. It's only an hour-long programme. They can edit you selectively to make you say anything they want you to say. You're the ingredients in the broth, but they have the recipe books. They are the chefs. Don't let them use you like that. It's like the drugs. Just say no. If someone asks you to be in a mainstream TV programme, just say no. It's that simple. And this here is the UFO one. That was the 7/7 one. This is the UFO one. I don't know if it was the 7/7 or UFO one I was going to be in, but there's Mr. Maxwell, and there's his crew up behind. I know several of these people, and I know they're pretty annoyed with how they all portray as well.
Frankie Marr?
Yeah, the young woman at the front is Frankie Marr, and the dark-haired woman, yeah, she's was a presenter for Edge Media Television.
There's a woman on the right, a former Sun page.
That's Bridget, Bridget Barclay, yeah, who was treated appallingly in this programme. She, I don't think she really realises how awful they made her look. But she's a serial abductee contactee, and I've met her. I've talked to her.
Nick Pope had her under his wing, didn't he?
Yeah, which is a terrible thing to do. I think she's a bit naive actually. But they really made her look awful. She tried to take a lie detector in this programme, and Maxwell put a stop to it. I wonder why. He was scared. He said out, well, I really shouldn't do this because I can't allow this to happen. I mean, if she fails, she's going to be devastated. No, they weren't scared she would fail. They were scared she would pass, which she would have done. Now, where does all this come from? Why is there all this? Why is this TV used in such a way to create these awful programs which are designed to control our minds? And it all goes back to all kinds of different forms of mind control. And this man is a very, very interesting chap to listen to if you actually watch him on YouTube. This is him being interviewed by G. Edward Griffin back in the 80s. His name's Yuri Bezmenov. Now, he was a spy. He worked for the KGB, this famous Soviet intelligence agency. And he talked about how the methods used by that organisation to actually subvert and control anything they infiltrated. Because, of course, at the end of the Cold War, we still don't know the full extent of how the world's most successful intelligence agency, actually managed to get involved in. And really, during the Cold War, they completely and utterly had the West trussed like a turkey in terms of intelligence. There's these things called the Venona decrypts, which are never going to be completely decoded, but there are probably hundreds of thousands of former KGB spies walking around today. A few were caught, the Cambridge spies and people like that, but most of them got away with it. Now you might think, well, the Cold War's over. Cold War's, it's happened. Russia's now changed. The West has now changed. The world has changed. This is ancient history, isn't it, Ben? Well, what if secretly, during the Cold War, both sides were actually controlled by the same global elite? And there's distinct evidence for this. Griffin himself, the presenter of this, provides some. There's a guy called Anthony Sutton who's written a book called National Suicide, I very much recommend. And what if that same force, the force that controlled both sides, it's still at large in the world today? Then what Bezmenov said back then still counts. There's a word that Bezmenov, if you watch this, he talks about the various methods, which I'm going to go through now. There's a generic word to describe everything of what Bezmenov talks about, which is not mentioned in this particular program, but I'm going to use it. It's cultural Marxism. I'm going to describe to you what everything to do with what I think is behind this method of mind control. Cultural Marxism, I say, is probably the second most effective mind control operation in the history of the world, after perhaps mainstream organised religion. Some of you might feel uncomfortable with some of the information I'm about to give you. Some of you might feel upset. Some of you might end up disliking me for what I'm about to say, but it is true. And I think everybody needs to know this. We can only benefit if everyone understands what I'm about to describe. So what is cultural Marxism? I mean, are you affected by cultural Marxism? You may think, no, I'm not, but perhaps you are. In fact, I think everyone is to a certain extent. Have you ever gone into a cafe and gone up to the guy behind the counter and you say, could I have a black coffee, please? And then you pull yourself up, even if it's only for a moment, and you think, oh, I said something racist. And if it's a black person serving you, you might feel guilty. You might feel you've attacked this person. In fact, you've done nothing of the sort. You've asked for a cup of coffee without any milk in it. A completely benign action. But because of cultural Marxism, you might feel, even if it's just for a moment, that you've done something wrong. You get that moment of pause. There's many, many other examples I can give you. You probably already thought of some. And it's everywhere, and how it affects you will depend on who you are, depend on your racial background, whether you're a man or a woman, your sexuality, your sexual orientation, etc., etc., etc. It's not, and contrary to what some people say, it's not something designed just to attack one group. It's not just about attacking white people or attacking men. It may seem that way, but it's not. It's about controlling everybody and attacking everybody. It's about the creation of every human being in the world, gay or straight, man or woman, black or white, and turning us into farm animals. That's what it's about, through changing our thoughts and feelings. Do you recognise this chap? Karl Marx. Yeah. Now he, whether you support him or oppose him, and I personally oppose him, I think he's a tool of the New World Order, but whether you do or not, you cannot disagree that this is one of the most influential people who ever lived. Everybody in the world, certainly every society on earth, has in some way been influenced by the ideas of this man. He lived in the 19th century, he was German, he spent most of his life in London, and he came up with what became known as Marxism, in publishing this book, The Communist Manifesto. Well, I'll come to that in a minute, there we go. The Communist Manifesto, one of the most widely read books ever, which he co-wrote with Friedrich Engels, one of his colleagues, and the guy who gave him most of his money. He's quite a slob, Karl Marx, actually. And he's a modest man too, as you can see. That's his grave. Well, to be fair, actually, he was buried in a different grave behind there. I mean, I went to Highgate Cemetery because I was interested in its paranormal history, because it's a very paranormal place. And part of the tour is you see the Karl Marx Memorial. Karl Marx is buried under there with his long-suffering wife, Jenny of Westphalia. And his son, who was called Frederick Marx, but he was actually called Frederick Engels Jr. for most of his life. He was buried there in 1929 when he died. He was actually the son of Karl Marx, but they never told him because Marx didn't want any scandal, so he got his friend Engels to pretend it was his kid. It was actually his maid, it's Marx's maid, Helen de Muth, who was actually the mother. But that, to be fair, that was actually put up in 1955. So you can't actually blame Karl himself for such a pretentious tomb. But I'm sure he'd have wanted to be memorialised in that way. Now this is an Italian chap called Antonio Gramsci. Now he's not very well known in history, but probably apart from Lenin in Russia and Karl Marx himself, this is probably one of the most important figures in the history of Marxism. Now, he was an Italian guy who was in jail, and he wrote a book called The Prison Notebooks, and someone criticised me recently because I hadn't read The Prison Notebooks. I have actually read some of it now. It's actually long and rambling. It's the kind of book a guy would write when he was stuck in jail. And he spent most of the rest of his life in jail and then in hospital. But he talked about the methods that he said that basically the whole idea of Marxism was that it's a conflict economic situation, and the purpose of history is leading up to a situation where the working class, what Marx called the proletariat, takes control of industry and the means of production and the entire economy, and then you have socialism, which then becomes communism. And Gramsci actually said that Marx got a few things wrong. It's not just economics and brute force through which the ruling class controls society in this conflict situation. It's also what Gramsci called cultural hegemony, and it includes all kinds of things such as religion, such as cultural norms, such as have we been about an hour? Have I been going about an hour?
Yeah.
About an hour, right. And all kinds of other situations like that. What we would today call, I suppose we call them ways of life. There's all kinds of things such as styles, fashions, trends, language, as Orwell pointed out, and all kinds of things like this. This all goes into cultural hegemony, and these are the tools by which they control things. And this was very well known. This is very, very well interpreted by many, many people after Gramsci died, because the Prison Notebooks and his other writings were very influential. Because of course, if you work out tools that are used to control society, you can then use those tools yourself to mould society in whatever form you want. And these people in particular, I think, use Gramsci's ideas. This is Theodor Adorno and Klaus Horkheimer, and they are part of what's known as the Frankfurt School of Critical Theory. And it was set up in Frankfurt, hence the name in Germany, and then moved to the United States. And they really came up with a lot of ideas that were similar to what Gramsci was saying, that society could be controlled, it could be manipulated through, just if you can put certain ideas into society, you can change everything about that particular society simply through people's modelling and moulding people's behaviour and people's thoughts and people's feelings, like the language they use and things like that. You can create conflict between people where you need to create conflict. You can unite warring tribes where you need to unite them, and create warring tribes out of peaceful tribes whenever you want to. And methods were created for doing both, as and when required. The Fabian Society. This is essentially the British arm of the Frankfurt School, really. It's an organisation that very few people have heard of, but it's very, very powerful and influential. In fact, its list of chairmen, chair people, chair individuals, how they choose to identify themselves, is quite revealing. Ed Miliband, Tony Blair, David Lloyd George, all prime ministers or leaders of the Labour Party. Hi, Richard.
Just take away that Fabian Society and put a capital B, B or C in that box.
Fabian Society.
BBC.
Oh,
the
right.
same box as the BBC.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, this is very much influencing the BBC. There's many Fabian members actually in the BBC, and indeed in all walks of life. It's very similar to Common Purpose, actually. If you've heard of Common Purpose and seen what Brian Gerrish has said about common purpose. Oh yeah.
The cube is also Saturnian.
Oh yeah, of course, the black cube. That's right. This is a red cube, but then it could be a blend of Saturnianism and Saturnian Marxism, if there's a phrase you could call that. Now, George Orwell, as I said earlier, was a member of this organisation. Now, I think he really didn't like what they were doing, and he wanted to expose it. Now, he could have written a book saying, my life inside the Fabian Society, what's really going on, and what they want for this world. What would have happened if he'd done that? Crazy. He's a nut. He's a conspiracy theorist, Dave. He's loony.
George Orwell's real name was Eric Blaine.
That's right. No relation to Tony, apparently. Yeah, he's a nut. He's a loony. He's a conspiracy theorist. Don't listen to him. He's stupid, and he'll be forgotten. But instead, he wrote 1984, a piece of allegorical fiction, which is considered a classic of modern literature. And allegorical fiction is what I've written in my books, actually. I think I've in a sense been inspired by Orwell in writing my books, because I think you can say things through a story, an imaginary story, which you can't say possibly factually or not reach as many people. So he did an excellent job, and Orwell's courage was not in vain. Now, one of the things that the Frankfurt School and other cultural Marxists have talked about is the need for constant change. So you're never sure of anything. Everything's always changing. Everything's in flux. There's nothing stays still. Because when things stand still and things are stable, you get in a situation where you can essentially put an anchor into that. It can be an anchor on your sanity and on your awareness and your identity, or what kind of person you are. Now, if these stable things are all moved around and changed, you can't do that. Have you noticed how pub names are always changing? Yeah, those are the pubs that are still open, that is, have been closed by the smoking ban. This is a pub in Oxford actually called the Cow and Creek. It's on New Road. This is a very old pub. It's about 400 years old actually, this pub. Now it's had all kinds of names. OX1, Cape Passa, several others, all in the last 20 years or so. Now in the 380 years before that it was called the Westgate. It was called the Westgate and it kept its name the Westgate. And that's because it's at the old west gate of the city. In medieval times there was a gate there. Now, for some reason now they've got to keep changing the name. It was called the Westgate for 380 years, and in the 20 years since then it's had about 5 different names. And all other pubs are doing this. Everything's changing its name. Every time you go into a place, you'll find it's got a new name. Not just pubs, but other institutions as well. It's been taken over by another company. It's been rebranded. Everything's always rebranded and changed. Everywhere, and it's very, very confusing, it's disconcerting, and it's meant to be, because it breaks down that feeling of security and stability, and this is where we all are. Oh yeah.
The RUC in Northern Ireland policy where the British suspect they'd actually terrorists.
Yeah.
Would leave them in one room for more than 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Just cut them out.
Yeah, that's very interesting, isn't it? Yeah, it's all psychology. These people, like the Frankfurt School, are all run by top psychologists. There's other organisations. I mentioned the Fabian Society, Common Purpose, the Tavistock Institute. I have personal experience of the Tavistock Institute. I actually knew one of its founding members, and she was extremely destructive, a very malevolent person, and she attacked my family deliberately. And I don't have time to go into that now. But I know exactly the methods they use. And now I just want to talk about sex now. Shall we talk about sex? Yeah, this is interesting. Culture creators planned on a hypersexualized society a long time ago. That's true. The goal was to remove love from sex, make bonding obsolete, and destroy the family unit. Most people look at each other as sex objects now. Now that's actually very, very true. It's our whole attitude in our society towards sex has changed. It's changed quite distinctly, to the point where, in a sense, people don't fall in love in the same way they used to. And they don't bond with each other in that way, which is why loneliness is now an epidemic. It's why families are much less stable. I'll be saying more about family in a moment, but I think our changing attitude to sex is one of the ways that the family structure is broken down, because they do want a destruction of families. If you want a vision of what this New World Order might be like, check out Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. That's an amazing book. It was written in 1930, a science fiction novel, decades ahead of its time, and by another man who was also a member of the Fabian Society, called Aldous Huxley, who was also George Orwell's school teacher. What I wouldn't give to be a fly on the wall. One of their after-school discussions. No.
Did you see the logo of the Fabian Society?
The red square, yeah.
No, it's a sheep.
Oh yes, of course, there's several logos. The wolf in sheep's clothing, that's absolutely true, yeah. And then we come up to the break-up of the family, which is happening more and more and more. Husbands and wives, when they do get married, don't stay together. Children of number of single-parent families are going up. A number of children who don't see one, or who grow up not knowing one of their parents or both of their parents, usually the father. It's expanding, and people brought up in that situation suffer from terrible psychological trauma. And traumatised people, as we all know, trauma, like as with torture, is a way of breaking people's willpower down so they can be controlled more easily. So one-parent households, bringing up children, the children were brought up traumatised, the children can then be moulded more easily. And you may think that's a horrible thing to do, but we're dealing with people who don't care if it's right or wrong, they don't care if it's damaging or not. They have a vision for the future of this world, and they don't care how many lives they destroy, or even if they destroy the entire earth in order to do it. And I'll be saying in a little while exactly how far I think they're willing to go. Right, this is a clip from a superficially benign programme called Peppa Pig. A lot of little kids love this. This is a story, it's a cartoon series about a family of anthropomorphic pigs, and the main character is a little girl pig called Peppa, and she lives with her brother, who's called Gus, I believe, and the mother and father. Now, the father is a complete bumbling idiot. He is, and silly daddy is kind of the catchphrase. Peppa's always saying, oh, silly daddy, what's daddy done now? The denigration of the father, I mean, he's a very, very central part of the breakup of families, to destroy the family. And indeed, it comes in several different ways. Partly feminism, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, and also the fact that men often, especially young men, will actually ridicule people they think as a father, a man who has children and loves them and brings them up. They sometimes pour emasculating scorn on that man. Another family man, I bet you won't be coming down the pub tonight, will you? Things like that. So there's many ways in which the father is denigrated. A programme like this, I think, promotes that idea, and is put by the BBC. And there's many other examples of what I can think of, particularly do you remember those adverts? There's some adverts for gravy that used to be on a while ago with Linda Bellingham was the mother, a guy called John Redfern was the father, and there was these two very precocious little brats who were the children. And it was very similar to Peppa Pig. John Redfern's character, the father, was a complete and utter divvy. He used to just walk in and he used to shuffle up to the table like some kind of caveman. And the prim and proper mother would be making dinner, you know, crumbling the cube of gravy into the water. He'd say, what's for dinner today, dear? It's the same as before. And don't worry, Dad, we got gravy. And the plot would go thus. And there were half a dozen of these particular adverts over the years. It was very, very long lasting. Right, this is another TV show from the BBC called Tracy Beaker. Now, Tracy Beaker is a story of a young girl, a likeable young girl who's an orphan. She lives in local authority care. And my daughter used to watch this, and I shouldn't have let her, actually, because this is glamorising the idea of a child without parents. The orphan, essentially, is considered cool. It's cool not to have a mum and dad. Maybe you don't need a mum and dad. And so this is, I think, there's some bad ideas in this particular programme, Tracy Beaker. Anyone offended yet? No?
Hashtag triggered.
I'm not getting off this stage until I have at least one workout. We're going to talk about feminism. And it's a good thing. It has to be a good thing, doesn't it? Because it's about women's rights. And you can't possibly object to this unless you're some kind of evil sexist. Can you possibly, who could possibly object to this? Because feminism is just about making life better for women and therefore making life better for everyone. Or is it? Yes, if you look at the background to feminism, it comes out of this same stream of thought, same organisations I've been talking about this evening, the Fabian Society, the Frankfurt School, people such as Emily Pankhurst, who actually won Women the Right to Vote, was closely connected to the Australian Communist Party. It's all kinds of situations like this. Now, I'm not suggesting there are not legitimate women's rights issues in the world, not so much in Britain, but in other countries. Yet, and I think when the idea of feminism first emerged, they were very, very real and they were very tangible, very obvious injustices against women in society. Women couldn't vote, women couldn't own property, women had problems getting certain jobs and things like that, training to be doctors and things like that. Women couldn't do very easily. Yeah.
Rockefeller told Aaron Russo they created feminism because they only taxed half the population.
Yeah, exactly. Well, when getting women into the workforce and liberating them by putting them in factories and slaving away like the men, meant they could pay taxes and things like that. And they were taught to smoke by a guy called Edward Albanese, the nephew of Sigmund Freud, who was closely attached to the Frankfurt School. It's not only got women ill, but it's reduced their fertility, which is another thing I'll come to in a minute about the reduction of population. But it made them financially dependent as well. When previously a woman who had a good husband and was a housewife actually lived a pretty good life. Now,
the ones that didn't have a good husband, who used to give them a good hiding when if Newcastle lost.
Of course, domestic. Yeah. But you see, the thing is, there of course there were genuine. If you didn't have a good husband, of course you wouldn't. And I'm not denying there were genuine women's rights issues.
That didn't.
And
that's down to the police though, because they say we don't get involved in domestics.
That's right.
But they do, yeah. But what's happened now is that when those were solved, it hasn't gone. Feminism hasn't stopped. Feminism is now continuing. Except the gripes of modern day feminists are they're much more abstract and they're harder to understand. If you ask a modern feminist about why she considers women to be victims in the world, she'll say something like, you'll come out with a lot of words such as microaggression, cisgender, and things such as this, which you have to look up.
It just ridicules it, doesn't it?
Yeah, you have to look up these words to find out what they mean.
And misogyny.
Yeah, misogyny. Now, misogyny is an interesting word because it has a literal meaning and an Orwellian meaning. Its literal meaning means a hatred of women, but its Orwellian meaning is kind of anyone who disagrees with all this. Misogyny is just like racism, it's just like homophobia. You can be it even when you're not it. Does that make any sense?
And the same applies to women. The opposite, the female equivalent of misogyny is called misandry.
Yeah.
Find me a woman who's ever heard of that.
Yeah, now this is a photograph taken in the 1960s, and you see these women here are holding up a banner saying "Women of the World Unite." This is actually an adaptation of a quote from Karl Marx. It's actually on the title page of the Communist Manifesto. It's even written on his huge great big epitaph in Highgate Cemetery. Workers of the world unite. And they've adapted it into women. But unite against what? For what? And again, if you ask this, you'll get some very spurious answers, which aren't always easy to understand. And they'll say phrases like patriarchy. Now, if you ask them what a patriarchy is, they will say that it's kind of a form of social oppression and control which exists in a way that is so subtle that it can't be detected. And it is a tacit, almost telepathic, subconscious conspiracy between all male human beings, or specifically white male human beings, white heterosexual male human beings, and it's a kind of almost like something we essentially our minds are locked into a single cause, which is the oppression and abuse of all non-male human beings. And it's a completely unfalsifiable hypothesis. You can't ever prove that there is no patriarchy. If you say to yourself, well, I'm not part of this conspiracy, they'll say, yes, you are. You may not know it, but you are. And you may not be able to prove you are, but you are. And even if it looks like you're not, and I perceive that you're not, you still are. It's extremely anti-intellectual. It's totally illogical, but it's meant to be. That's the whole point. It's meant to be. It's meant to shut down the rational part of our mind and make us creatures of pure emotion, and make us act on whims without any really knowing why we're doing it. And the upshot of this, of course, the effect of this is it encourages women to leave their male partners and say, you don't need a father, kick the father out. The father is at best useless. Just get rid of it. At worst, it's pathological, and there's long books explaining why the father has been a denigration on society since day one, even though humans have been living in a nuclear family structure since before we were human, when we were swinging through the trees, when we were apes, we still lived in a nuclear family structure. That's now been broken down. And feminism is one of the things which does it. Now, we're going to come on to going back to the BBC. This is all connected. And this is a, as you see here, this is an advert for a movie called Shirley Valentine. How many people have seen the film Shirley Valentine? Yeah. I saw this film. I came back from a late shift at the hospital, so I came in at 10 p.m. and this film was just coming on, and I watched it, and I really loved it. I thought it was fantastic. It's a wonderful film about this. Pauline Collins plays the main character, who's a woman who lives a very ordinary life, who breaks away from her ordinariness to live and she decides she wants to live an extraordinary life. And it's uplifting, it's inspiring, it's a beautiful story, absolutely wonderful. And I watched it, and when the film was over, I just thought, oh, that's so damn good. I've got to get the DVD of this, I've got to see it again. And it was only when I went out and got the DVD of it, I realised the version I'd just seen on the BBC was edited. It was cut to bits. Now, the reason it was cut to bits, now bear in mind this is 10:30 in the evening, right? This is when all the kids should be in bed. Yet this programme does contain it contains a few swear words. Every so now you get the F word in the script. Not excessively, only about 4 or 5 times. It's used very well, I think. It's not overused, so it doesn't lose its power. So you get this little indelicacy of the F word. There's also some brief, mild nudity. Now, I knew that when I was watching it, because during the nude scenes, you see the picture quality suddenly goes down, and it gets a bit pixelated. And the reason is because the nude scenes are like cropped, so you can't see everything. And so when I watched the DVD, I suddenly realised that, and I thought, why did the BBC do that for a programme after the Watershed at 10:30 p.m? Why did that? Why did they do that? It's odd, because I suppose the BBC doesn't like people being inspired and uplifted and seeing films that make them feel like they're better people. They want us to feel broken down and beaten down and feeling like we're worthless. And in fact, EastEnders, if you watch EastEnders, I could talk for an hour on EastEnders alone. It's all about that. But anyway, well, another problem is it's the double standard. Now, I mentioned, of course, this completely harmless film was edited. Now, this is another BBC production called Gunpowder, and this was on earlier in the year, actually. How many people saw this? Now, it was highly praised by the critics. And that's, whenever you hear that, you know you've got problems. And they said it's actually a drama series about the gunpowder plot. And the critics said it was wonderful. It was really, really well made. It was authentic. The dialogue was authentic, and the acting and the script and the costumes, everything was really, really well done. But then they had almost as an afterthought, does it really have to be quite so gruesome? It's almost like an apology at the end of this praise. They said, well, it was a little bit too gruesome. Now, I had a look at Gunpowder. I didn't actually watch it myself, but I had a look through some of the more controversial elements of this. It contains scenes of beatings, hangings, burnings, disembowelings, beheadings, and crushings. This was shown, I think, about 9 p.m, so it was shown earlier than Shirley Valentine. And the double standard, of course, here is that Gunpowder, a BBC production which is extremely violent and upsetting, was not actually censored in any way. Yet Shirley Valentine, a film that is uplifting and enlivening and makes you feel like a better person, was completely and utterly cut to bits. It was edited to bits. Because there was a brief flash of tits. At one point, she actually says, fuck. Just once or twice. And they edited that out. The reason it's very obvious why the BBC has this double standard is because programmes like Gunpowder have a particular purpose, the opposite of that of Shirley Valentine. The purpose of Gunpowder is essentially to induce trauma in the viewer. Now, they found out from how trauma affects people. Suffering trauma, of course, is a terrible thing. Witnessing real trauma, such as a doctor and a nurse does in a hospital, also has a similar effect to actually experiencing trauma on a lower level, but if you experience it for longer, it can have the same effect. Watching a TV programme with a lot of violence in, and a lot of the upsetting sadistic scenes like you see in Gunpowder, actually also has a low-level, chronic, traumatic effect on the brain. So if you're watching programmes like this over and over again, over a period of years, it has the same effect as someone who might maybe be tortured for a couple of weeks? Just 5 minutes? 5?
Yeah.
Alright, okay, let's get a move on. Skip that. I didn't realise, sorry.
I'd like you to do 10 if you could.
Alright, okay. Can I do 10?
Yeah.
Alright,
So we'll let him do 10?
Thank you. Now the ultimate goal of all this is this transformation of the human species, as David Wright was talking about if you saw him on Thursday night, is to completely strip us of our humanity altogether and turn us into something else, even to the point where high technology is actually blended with biological life. And we are essentially turned into part machine, part biological organisms. Cyborgs, to use that phrase from science fiction. Now there's an organisation called the 2045 Project, which is run by a guy called Ray Kurzweil, who actually works for Google and for NASA and several other organisations like this. And he's all in favour of this. He calls it transhumanism, and this is a term that's, I think, again, emerged out of science fiction, but it is very, very well established now in mainstream discussion. Transhumanism is where we no longer are human, and we are essentially we become machines in a sense. And there's several different visions for this. Now Kurzweil waxes lyrical about it. He actually is all in favour of it. He wants it done as quickly as possible, because he says once we have gone through this transhumanism phase, we will become a new type of creature in a new type of world. Humans, we will essentially be godlike. We will be immortal, we won't die, because our brains can be simply uploaded to computers, which we can just replace them, replace the components like we do our own computers. Our minds can work faster. We never have to forget anything because our memories will be perfect. But I think Kurzweil doesn't realise this, or maybe he does and he's telling us. But the vision for our humanity and our future world as a transhumanist machine, our own vision for that, or Kurzweil's professed vision, might be very, very different to that of the political classes. You see, once we are stripped of our humanity, and our brains are essentially part of a machine, we won't even be human. We may become very, very different. And there's no guarantee that we're going to be sort of godlike. We could become subhuman. Aldous Huxley in Brave New World theorised this. He said that humans will no longer be born. They will be grown and decanted, was the phrase he uses, in these hatcheries, these big factories with artificial wombs where the babies were grown. They didn't have parents. They were just grown. And that then, when they came out, they were not all the same. There were different types of being, there were different types of creatures. There was the alphas and the betas, which were like the superior beings in Kurzweil's vision. But then they went down, there was the gammas, there was the deltas, and the epsilons, who only lived for 20 years and had an IQ of about 20. And they just did the simplest jobs. What's your bet that we'll end up as these epsilons rather than the alphas, as Kurzweil said? I don't think we can take the risk, because we have to deal with capabilities, not intents. And we know that we have an elite here that wants to create a new world order, a new society, with less than 500 million people in it. Now that's barely a tenth of what is in the world today, the world population today. This is why they're attacking fertility. I didn't have time to talk to you about how fertility is dropping, how sperm counts are dropping among men, how more and more women are becoming barren, how rates of miscarriages are going up, about how people are producing less children, about how people are dying from diseases that didn't exist 30 years ago, in vast numbers. New cancers keep emerging. And the goal is for us, most of us, to be dead, and the rest of us to be subhuman, to be nothing more than robots in a society ruled by one world government, which has complete control over a completely planned and resource-based economy, hence Agenda 21, which you're going to have enough time to talk to you about tonight. But don't give up. I don't want you to go home and have nightmares here, because there is a distinct change that has come over. There are forces rebelling against this. Mark and I have discussed this on our radio show, our interview, that there was distinct signs that the control system is faltering, and I believe for a period in 2016 it totally lost control of the political structures of this world. Just for a brief time. It managed to grab back onto them by the skin of its teeth, by its fingernails, but it could lose them again. They don't have everything their own way. This deep state, this Illuminati that David Icke talks about, does not have everything its own way. It has opposition. And we're not helpless in this. This is Gandalf from Lord of the Rings. Now, Gandalf was created by J.R. Tolkien, who was a very, very deep-thinking, very spiritual man who was in touch with the deep forces at work in the universe, I believe. And Lord of the Rings is more than just a story. There's something mythological about it. There's something archetypal about it. It's a very, very interesting story. This is the character Ian McKellen there, who plays the character in the film. This is the actor. And the line goes, "Some believe it is only great power that can hold evil in check." But that's not what I have found. I have found that it's the everyday deeds of ordinary folk that keep the darkness at bay. Small acts of kindness and love. This means that we, as people, have the power to resist this New World Order, to fight back against it, to prevent it from happening, and create a better world than the one envisaged by the deep state. Martin Luther King said here, this hour in history needs a dedicated circle of transformed non-conformists. Our planet teeters on the brink of annihilation. Dangerous passions of pride, hatred and selfishness are enthroned in our lives, and men do reverence before the false gods of nationalism and materialism. The saving of our world from impending doom will come not through the complacent adjustment of the conforming majority, but through the creative maladjustments of the non-conforming minority. This is essentially saying the same thing that Gandalf said in another form. Again, this is a guy, I think, who he knew things. He knew, for example, when he was going to die. He said, "Oh, I'm going to die. I'm going to die." He was killed. He was shot in 1968. He knew that was coming. I think he was in touch with higher forces. This guy. This is Lyle Watson. Now he's very interesting because I'm nearly finished, Maureen. He did an experiment on monkeys, which proved basically, I don't have time to go into detail now, but the 100th monkey, he proved that there's a collective subconscious which, when it hits a critical mass way below the majority of people who believe in it or have this certain idea, it immediately infects the entire subconscious of that particular species, the entire collective subconscious, and the same idea will go into all people. So don't worry if you're a minority and we're laughed at and we're marginalised, because we only have to hit that point where the critical mass through which that idea then goes into that collective subconscious and it becomes a part of the entire species. We only have to reach that point to win. We don't have to convert the majority of people.
Ben, just on that thought, it was mathematically proven in subsequent years after that, just what the number is. It's the square root of 1%.
All right, that's very interesting, thanks.
Work that out for Britain, it's not many people at all.
No, I didn't know that. I know that Lyle Watson said it was roughly 1% of snow macaques in Japan. Which is where the phrase 100th monkey comes from, but I didn't know that it had been worked out more. So we don't know how close we are. We could be there, we could be at that very moment now, or it could be in 2 years. It might have already happened, and things will just exponentially increase. Judging by what happened in 2016, I'd say we're already past it, and we're now on the finishing straight. I know that's a maybe over-optimistic way of viewing it, but it could be true. I'm not lost hope. I do believe we can break through this. We can negate all the nasty things I've talked about here. We can negate. And as Oscar Wilde said, always forgive your enemies. Nothing annoys them so much. And finally, Mahatma Gandhi. When I despair, I remember that all through history, the ways of truth and love have always won. There have been tyrants and murderers, and for a time they can seem invincible, but in the end, they always fall. Think of it. Always. There is such a thing as natural law. There is such a thing as karma. There is such a thing as when you're working in favour of natural law, and you do no harm and things like that, there is a natural path. The universe will guide you and will push you in that. That's the natural direction of the universe. To go against that, which is what this agenda does, is actually what is creating more and more resistance. It's much more difficult to do that, to go against that natural law, which is why black magic spells are so much harder to perform than white magic spells, because this is why you have to sit around and drawing circles in the ground and sitting there chanting for ages and ages and ages for a curse. Yet a simple protection spell or a blessing is very, very easy to do, because it's in line with natural law. Now, I'm sorry I didn't have time to give you every single piece of this lecture. I did try to shorten it down. The full length is 2.5 hours. I tried to cut an hour off and I didn't succeed. I'm sorry about that. But if you go to YouTube, you can actually see a full version of this particular talk. It's on my channel. But thank you very much for your attention, everybody.
Comment on another great and thought-provoking talk there, and perhaps next year come back and maybe do programming on programs.
Oh, well, I'll see what I can do.
Yeah, when you mention EastEnders. Okay, folks, we're going to have 15 minutes or something?
Half an hour.
Half an hour? Okay, that's
There's
great.
sandwiches,
So use the facilities and get some refreshment. And we're coming back for Mark's last talk, okay?
And look what I've got here. Truth Seekers Northeast have given me an alien invasion owner's resistance manual as opposed to workshop manual. Oh, this looks really cool. They just handed this to me. I'll show you. I may have already shown you the photos. If not, I will. Alien invasion. Know your enemy. All extraterrestrial life forms. That's not all of them are enemies, but hey. Oh, this is great. Look, this is great. I've seen a few of these like Haynes novelty manuals. Like there's a Starship Enterprise User's Guide and things like that. The complete guide to surviving the alien apocalypse. Oh my goodness, look at it. And there's a zombie survival guide here too. Don't panic. Oh yes. Thanks for all the fish. We must read the following before continuing. Oh, wicked. Ministry of Alien Defence. Oh my goodness me, I'm sure there's a novel in here somewhere. And there's the ingredients. Oh wow, this looks really cool. This was presented to me. They presented it to me in front of all the audience. It was really, really cool. I might be able to include the video of it. Aliens, Fact or Fiction. Oh my god, this is great. I'm going to love this. This is just perfect. Oh, yeah. MAD, Ministry of Alien Defence. Are you really interested in saving the planet? That sounds like a job for me. Yeah. Alien Technology Matrix. Oh wow. Look at all these little green men. Reptilians! Oh yeah, reptilian shapeshifters. You probably mentioned, yeah, this is, I expect that David Icke gets a mention in this. The prophet David Icke, as he'll be known in this book. Yeah. Alien knowledge. History of alien contact. I think that's Area 51, yeah, map of Area 51. Yeah. Oh, the tree shape, oh, they've got Greada. I thought you mentioned it was like Grenada. I thought it said Grenada for a minute. Alien implants. Anti-alien foil. Oh, we all know, every good conspiratorial expert needs to know that. Classic ray gun. Oh, wow. Oh, look. Disarm your opponent, throw a stone. Yeah. Oh, look. How to escape from alien combat. Different weapons and ways of getting out. Oh, wicked. I'm sure I'll have fun with this book. Yeah. Sean T. Page, an expert in what he describes as the alien menace to this planet. Abducted by a flying saucer as a child. In 2010 he joined the Ministry of Alien Defence in London. But he's still... Oh, good. He's author of the controversial government publication for schools. Mummy, I think my teacher is a shape-shifting lizard. His hobbies include paranoia, conspiracy theories and antiques. A very, very strange mixture. Oh, well, with many of the world's top scientists now predicting the Earth will be invaded by aliens. Oh, wow, it's good. Discover the truth about aliens and how they have already infiltrated the Earth. Learn the real story behind the Roswell Cache, Area 51 and terrifying facts about alien abductions. Read about the alien species that threaten us. DNA-hungry greys, shape-shifting draconian reptiles. Become an ET prepper. Create an abduction safe room in your home. Oh, that's tricky. Comprehensive analysis of alien invasion strategies and how humanity can defeat them. Oh, wicked. Oh, this is just really wonderful. This is like a present from Truth Seekers Northeast to say thanks for the talks I've been giving over the last year. And I really, really appreciate it. So thank you very much, all of you, everyone at Truth Seekers Northeast, for bringing this to me. It's wonderful. I love it. Well, it's November the 18th. Oxford is all set for Christmas. It's quite nice, this little bit, actually. It's not too garish. Well, I'm home. I'm back home. Yeah, I'm actually home in Oxford now. It's Sunday. It's about 6 o'clock and I'm home. I was going to go to a pub quiz with my daughter, but she can't make it. Oh, wow. Look, you can sit on bales and sleigh. Oh, look. There's a Christmas song, and I've had mince pies to eat. Yes, I've been carried away by it already. Yes, indeed. have to start publishing my Hapanmo Radio Christmas schedule. Well, anyway, I'm home. Finally, I can carry on writing my book and hopefully finish it soon. I've had a lovely time. I've had an absolutely fantastic time. Been away 5 days with my friends at Truth Seekers North East. I've done so much. I went to see David Icke live. I'll probably write a report on that on Hapanmo Voice. I've spoken twice at 2 separate events for Truth Seekers North East, and discussed UFOs, the BBC, Professor Brian Cox, loads of other things. And had a fantastic time socialising with those friends of mine. I really do feel like I've made friends for life there. Playing with Maureen's cats, things like that. Yeah, it's like it's just really is just recharge the batteries. You know what I mean? To be with people like that. I mean, it's a bit of a sad fact, but you know, I don't really have a social life here in my hometown. My social life is what I've just been through when I meet people on the internet. There's only one person I regularly sort of associate with outside my family here. I do have my family here, which is nice, but there's only one person I regularly associate with, one of the porters. What's going on over there? Oh, that's very smart. There's something else over here, outside Chemtrail Central. Yeah. It doesn't look like any geoengineering promotional event for the Oxford Martin School, but you never know. As I was saying, yeah, this is really, these little trips to visit people are really, really important to me. Very, very much indeed. That's strange. And so I really am so pleased I went. Although, of course, it's been at the back of my mind, I want to get my book done. I want to get my book done. And I'm glad I'm now going to have a chance to do it. And so I knew when I saw what I was going to do this week, go off to Cardiff, then go to Newcastle, I knew very well that I was not going to do much writing. But now I think I am now. I've got nothing planned anyway. I mean, obviously I don't know what the future holds for this coming week and the weeks after, but leading up to Christmas now, I'm not planning any more trips away. I'm going to work, of course. I'll be working, but I won't be going away. So I have a chance now to write my book, and I reckon 2 weeks or so, maybe even less, I can finish it, depending on how much I do on it and how quick progress is. I know how it's going to go. I've worked it all out in my head. I've written notes. I now, you know, there's no wall that I have to face like I had to face for my first book. You know, where I had to break through, and I'm not sure where the plot's going to go. I'm not sure how to make this work or that work within the story. No, I know how it's going to go. There's a few details to work out, but I know the basic outline of the plot, and I know how the book's going to go, and I know how it's going to finish. And then that'll be the end of the Roswell trilogy. I'll have to say goodbye to those characters. It's going to be difficult, but it doesn't stop me from writing other books in that universe featuring those characters. There's nothing to prevent me doing that. Right. So I want to say a big thank you to everyone who made it happen. I want to say thanks to Maureen and to Dawn and to Dave and to Trish and to Joe and to David Icke, of course, and everyone who came along to the events, and anyone else I might have left out whose name I haven't mentioned for Truth Seekers North East and who goes to their events. Thank you very much. Now I have to bury myself in writing, and hopefully soon there will be a third book. I have sold books. I brought 10 books with me, 10 Risings, 10 Reveals. I've sold half of them, nearly all Risings actually. I thought it'd be the other way round, but no, it's mostly Risings. I've got 1 Rising left, 4 Reveals. Hopefully next time I go on a sales trip there'll be 3 books. So how am I going to carry them? I don't have a car, you see. I mean, Andrew Johnson, he can just bundle his books in the back of his van. He can carry big boxes of them. You know, Dr. Judy Wood's book, which is huge. I have to carry things by hand. I'll work it out. I'll find some way. I met a new friend as well, Angela, someone from Durham who was new to Truth Seekers North East, and she is very, very keen on tarot and things like that. Yeah, it's really nice. Oh yeah, I went back to Cloud 9 as well, which is nice. You remember my video on Cloud 9? I went back there with Angela and Maureen, and that was fun. So I've done so much I haven't filmed. Actually, I didn't film all of it. Don't see why I should, really. A lot of it's stuff I filmed before. I don't want to repeat myself. But what a wonderful few days. So thank you very much to everyone who made it happen. Of course, thanks to all of you for watching. More videos coming soon, I hope. I'll keep the videos making the videos as much as I can. Thanks for watching Panro TV. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity, Stop the New World Order.